Actually, I was at an election night party, and it's like, oh, all the candidates line up on the wall in there. I didn't even think, oh, wait a second.
They're recording.
It was nice. We had two.
Waiting for it to say record. There we go. Good morning and welcome to SACOG Transportation Meeting for Thursday, November 7th at 2024. We're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Joyner.
Absolutely. You all please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you. Next up, roll call, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Director Branscombe,
Yes, ma'am.
Chapman,
Here.
Early for Guerrero, absent. Howdashell,
Here.
Jennings, absent. Joyner,
Here.
Sander,
Here.
Vice Chair Gog, absent. Vice Chair Lauren,
Present.
Chair Bradford,
Here.
and ex officio member Aceves.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to public communications. Any person wishing to address the committee on an item not on the agenda may do so at this time. After 10 minutes of testimony, any additional testimony will be heard following the action items. I'm not aware of any public comment. Do you know of any, Lynette, that aren't on the agenda?
No public communications off the agenda.
Okay, great. With that, we will move on to the disclosure. Do you need me to read that or can we just?
Just if any committee members can acknowledge and let us know if you have any disclosures that you need to state.
Okay, so we'll move on to the consent item. Any public comment on consent?
There's no public comment.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Howdashell seconds.
Okay, first and a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Excellent. Next, we'll move on to the first action item, item 2, the Engage, Empower, Implement Awards. Morning, Rosie.
All right. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm Rosie Ramos, accompanied here with Nicole. I'm the project manager for the Engage, Empower, Implement program, or EI, as I'll be referring it for the rest of the presentation. I'm excited to be here today. It's a culmination of a few years of work, and so we're just really happy to be here. Before you today is an action item. As I stated in the staff report, the board, it's for the board or for you all to recommend to the board that they approve the final awards listed in your packet, awarding a total of $3.8 million across the 6 counties of our region. And before we get into the action, I do want to share a brief overview of the program and recap some of the work that we've done to get here, and of course, answer any questions that you might have. So EEI's main goal is to fund and normalize a community-centered planning process for project development. And what that means for this project is that we're providing seed funding for partnership efforts between a city or county and a community-based organization, or CBO, to do meaningful community engagement to result in specific projects or plans that center community. EEI is an important piece for the 2025 blueprint and helps us implement the triple bottom line adopted by the board: equity, economy, and environment, to create complete communities with high quality of life. EEI is also a core part of our funding programs, as was adopted by the board last month through the regional funding program guidelines. I also want to take a moment to highlight the 3 pillars of equity on which this program is designed that came from the extensive work with our CBO partners and our consultation with jurisdiction partners during the framework development process. Starting with structural equity. This looks at how the program can address underlying structural issues and policies that uphold inequities and commit to correcting past harms and preventing future unintended consequences. Second, we have procedural equity, which is how we're setting up this program. This includes our framework, the guidelines, and the implementation. It ultimately looks at how we design the decision-making processes that are transparent and inclusive for all communities to participate in. And finally, distributional equity. It ensures the fair distribution of services and resources across our region, prioritizing the distribution to support communities with the greatest needs. So with that background in mind, I'm going to shift a little bit and look at some of the key milestones that we've had for the last couple of years. So EI started in 2020 at the direction of the board to set aside funds from the funding program and figure out how to best invest resources across the region into our historically disinvested communities. In early 2022, the board adopted a racial equity statement and eventually the racial equity action plan. And while EEI is not explicitly an outcome of those particular efforts, it was a parallel effort. They were at the same time. We also held an RFP during that year in 2022 to bring on a consultant partner to help us create a board-adopted framework. We brought on HRNA advisors and AIM Consulting to help us do this work. Throughout 2023, we worked with the consultants and our CBO, with our CBO partners, hosting listening sessions, focus groups, and understanding what limitations and opportunities we had, and also having these conversations with our jurisdiction partners. From that information, we developed the framework that the board adopted in November of 2023, so 1 year ago. This framework set us up for the guidelines, the rubric, and the EEI review board that we put together. And the application was open from this May to early August, and then from August to September, the EEI review board reviewed and scored those applications. So what are in those applications and what did we ask? The application was heavily narrative focused. This was intentional and based on all of the work and feedback that we heard during the framework development process. One unique part of EEI is that we did not pre-impose a definition of equity when it came to the communities identified. That meant that folks were able to bring in their own definition. You didn't have to be in the environmental justice analysis or on CalEnviroScreen or Justice 40. It was through the narrative process that applicants were allowed to self-define. The questions looked at defining the community that you were going to work in, providing a historical understanding of how some policies or situations could have impacted that community in the past, and how they intended to partner with a community organization, and how they were going to work together to bring in residents throughout the whole process. The narratives and the rubric essentially highlighted these questions and were moved forward with the recommendations before you. So the rubric that was created was scoring based on these high-level narrative questions. I'll pause here if there's any questions on the program or application process. Okay. All right, well, now onto some application highlights. You do have summaries in your packet, but all of the work that we just discussed led to the applications that we received and show us that the current interest for this program is high and there is a need for this program in our region. The total sum of the applications were $5.2 million, which is well above the amount that we have available. And we had all 6 counties represented in the applications and in the final recommendations, showcasing that each county has its own unique needs when it comes to equity and community-based efforts. As a reminder, we do have 2 pots. One is for city and county applications, and a small pot was for just CBO applicants. And we received 12 applications from partnerships and then 7 CBO independent applications. The projects range from very specific community efforts to county-wide initiatives that bring in voices that have not traditionally participated. Oops. And while the applications range from broader initiatives around education and housing, food access, economic development, they all carry a nexus to transportation and air quality as they address accessibility to resources. The project applicants also highlight the varying needs across the region, one of which is the need to better understand our communities beyond the traditional methodologies like the environmental justice analysis or CalEnviroScreen, as I mentioned earlier. We want to know where these communities of needs really are and having better assessment of these communities at the local level, but also regional. And finally, you'll see that the project descriptions in the packet, there's a lot of feedback from the EEI review board. No application was perfect. And a lot of them have recommendations that we plan to discuss one-on-one with them in meetings to finalize those scopes. But it's important to note that we don't need them to be perfect. We're just looking for strong commitments and efforts. To look to a high-level overview of the EEI review board, they reviewed the applications, and it's through that work with them is how we got the final list that you're seeing in your packet. The group consisted of 9 participants with a mix of SACOG, city and county, and state agency staff and community representatives. A key priority for the board, for the EEI review board, was to be diverse in geographic distribution and a balance of agency staff and community representation. I will note it was quite challenging to hit all of these marks, given the requirements of time. That was quite a barrier. Folks individually put in over 40 hours of time to review, and then we collectively discussed for close to 10 hours. In the attachment that you have, it shares some of those high-level outcomes, but I really want to highlight a couple of things that came up during those conversations. The recommendations before you are how each application scored numerically, right? It's based on the framework and the application questions that I just went over. During our discussions, we really dove into that challenging and complex conversations around equity and how it shows up in each project. Of course, it's a challenging task. We discuss each project individually and how they all really do have merit. There's no doubt about it, which is what made it really difficult to not award every single one because we couldn't. We talked about the balance of how each sponsor is starting from a different place and understanding that where they're starting from coupled with the rubric, it created a healthy tension and conversations that led to a lot of fruitful dialogue. A lot of good lessons learned for future iterations of this program. We also discussed the 3 pillars of equity that I mentioned earlier and how that played out through the rubric lens. I'll be the first to share that the rubric is not perfect and measuring equitable impact is really difficult. But of course, you all know that. And because of the merit of all of the applicants and us really wanting to fund all of them that were listed, we did take an extra month. As you recall, we should have been here last month, but we took an extra month to try to see if there was any way that we could bring in additional funding to fund all of the projects. That effort, I would say, while we weren't able to get the funds, it was a fruitful exercise because we were able to connect with the region's community foundations. And while they weren't able to give us the money right now, they are very interested in looking at future cycles of this program to try to leverage state and federal dollars with philanthropy dollars, which is a really exciting opportunity for future cycles. And we intend to continue to explore those opportunities. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple of projects and then we will be close to ending. So the first project is Marysville, the Marysville Chinatown Blueprint. As you'll see, it was the first on the list. They are looking to engage community regarding the downtown area to create a pipeline to eventually recognize it as the official Chinatown. This grant aims to significantly engage community in that area and provide recommendations that will include limits for the Chinatown, adoption and recognition for it, identifying ways for the CBO to promote that economic development in that area, attracting visitors, residents and businesses, and all of this looking at improvements to the public space and transportation network as well. And secondly, another project we want to highlight is El Dorados. In El Dorado, they are looking to foster a community involvement process that will craft an impactful community-driven strategic plan for affordable housing. This project really does highlight what I mentioned earlier about the conversations on assessing where each community is starting from when it comes to equity. Their proposal centers on the specific needs for affordable housing in their county, but recognizing the limitations that they face and how a meaningful engagement campaign could help move the needle for them. It also highlights that while demographically speaking, those communities might not show up in our EJ assessment or Cal EnviroScreen, they are more affluent and wider communities. It doesn't mean that they're not addressing equity in their own way. It challenges us to think beyond those concentrations of communities of color and low income areas, but thinking about creating accessibility of high opportunity zones or areas to be more affordable and accessible. So those are 2 very different projects, but highlight sort of the range that we have. This is my last slide. What comes next after today, upon your recommendation and approval of the board, we would be meeting with each sponsor to discuss the finalizing of each scope. We would hope to have those conversations done through the end of the year and begin all the contracting and programming of the funds through early 2025, and then kicking off the projects after that. And we also intend to do a lot of check-in points with folks just to make sure that we're learning and capturing all of the lessons learned so that we can create better, improve the program for the future. So with that, I will take questions or comments.
Questions or comments from board members?
A great report. Exciting projects. And thanks for getting us out to the counties so we could see some of the areas. I particularly remember when we visited Marysville and seeing the community. And so combination of that being on the ground and then seeing this gives a real dimension to these projects, not just
Appreciate
a report. So thank you.
Dr. Bransky?
Again, a good report, really good report. You covered a lot. And you're describing it in the abstract. And I was particularly struck by your observation that differentiating between the equitable impact of these different proposals is difficult. I'll bet it's more than difficult. So I commend you. I mean, it's nice to have Marysville be recognized here, but how many proposals did you see?
19 in total, 12 for the city and CBO partnerships.
And you have to differentiate between those, and I'm certain they're all worthy.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, good for you all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Seeing no more director comments at the moment, we'll move on to public comment. So, Vincenzo? Morning.
There we go. Good morning. Good morning, Transportation Committee Directors. My name is Vincenzo Carrazza, the Public Works Director for the City of Marysville. I want to thank you, the Greater Board of Directors, and SACOG staff for starting the EEI program. I remember last year when Rosie and Nicole were presenting the program to this committee and the board and even some of the training programs. They pretty much did a whole educational barnstorming event. The advantages of letting the community-based organizations basically engage the communities. Government is restricted in some sense. And I remember the line about how we can't even provide food to get the community to come in, or we can't have a town hall in a park. You know, so the CBOs, their advantage is that they are engaged in the community. They know that they can have it in a church, you know, if that's, or some other event where government's so restricted. So I thought this program was a great idea, and I'm glad that we launched it. So thank you for that. So, you know, one of the questions is how does government empower the disadvantaged community, you know, when we don't speak their language or know their culture? So, hey, let's partner with the CBOs and let them run with it. I think you remember there was a comment that you had about going to Marysville. So that was one great thing that the board did, was you actually had a tour of the Chinatown in Marysville. So you saw what it is now and what it could become. In the staff report that that the city did with our Chinatown partners, we highlighted some of the history, and you mentioned equity. There's a sad history in California about how it treated the Chinatowns, and Marysville was actually one of the last remaining thriving Chinatowns because the other ones, they got chased out of town. So, you know, great thing is actually walking the site and seeing what you could do for Marysville. So this is a great opportunity for us to partner with our Chinatown communities and getting their vision of how to sustain the Chinatown. One is marking it out. Let's have a district. Let's call it Chinatown officially. So to empower them to speak up, I know John is here. He's going to speak to the specific plans. But one thing is he's going to get translators and speak to the people that have stakeholders. Well, they come all the way from Taiwan to visit us in Marysville during the Bakai.
20 seconds.
I don't speak, you know, I don't speak Chinese. So it's great for them to engage them to see what they want for the Chinatown. So help us today with a yes vote on the SACOG staff's recommendation, and then come back to Chinatown in Marysville several years, and we'll see how it comes. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lim?
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Lim. I am the president of the Marysville Chinese community. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for this. This is something that's pretty spectacular, something that I believe my grandparents would have never seen happen. As Vincenzo had spoke before, that one time the Marysville Chinese community was known as the third largest Chinese community in California. In Chinese, that'd be Samfao, right? Third city. Today, I think we number about 200 thereabouts. As you saw when you came in, the downtown area, what's considered Chinatown now, is pretty much empty as far as any type of businesses, homes, anything like that, people living there. I believe that with this grant, the Marysville Chinese community can figure out what it is that would actually bring some life back into Chinatown, bring some life back into Marysville to help this grow. One of the things that we've been batting around as the Chinese community, we have visitors coming in on buses. For example, Tsingtao asked me, because they came in with a tour bus, and they asked us if we had any way for them to charge their tour bus. So I believe this grant would be, is there a need for this? Does it open up any avenues to get that? For also, now that our parishioners are becoming older and older, how do they get around Marysville? How do they get from their cars to the temple? What do we need to do to improve our sidewalks? What do we need to do to improve our streets? What do we need to do to improve parking? Any of that. Also, I believe that as a resident, a lifelong resident, I'm fourth generation Chinese in the area. And I've seen good times in the 80s, and I've seen it slowly decline. And that's what I think that this opportunity would be, is how can we bring that vitalization back to the area? How can we bring economic growth, not only to the Chinese community, but to Marysville in general, the whole area? As you look now, it seems to me, things are shifting up north towards us. So can we take advantage of that? And how can we do that? And quite honestly, I believe that this grant and this, study and research and all the help that I've received will allow us to have this plan. How can we do this? What can we do? And then we can go after ways of doing it. What avenues are open to us to get the funding? What do the people want? Yeah, I'm just so excited. And,
30 seconds.
Thank you. And in closing, I would like to say this. The one thing that I have said since starting this whole thing, since moving back to California and getting involved with the Marysville Chinese community, my wife asked me, why am I doing this? And I had to look at her and I said, because if I don't do this, it's not going to be here for my children. And that's not fair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. I appreciate you coming down today.
May I make a quick comment? Thank you. Marysville, though Chinatown isn't what it was when I was a youngster. That said, there are still two tongues active in Marysville. And to say they don't always agree or work together well is an understatement, but they're there. And they're interested. And my next door neighbor, Gordon Tom, is a member of one, and John's a member of the other. And while they don't always meet together and get along great together, they both care about the same things. And John's doing a fabulous job. I wanted to commend you in public, John. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, I tried to find it. I apologize if it's hiding in plain sight. Is there a local match, and it could be in kind, that's required for this program?
There is no local match.
Okay, because certainly what you heard from at least the Marysville community, their time and effort qualifies. So, as what I would consider a local match, the sweat equity
Yes.
that goes into it. So I just wanted to make sure that I understood fully. If somebody said, well, what are you doing? Just giving away money? Well, this is an example. We're just not giving it away. For people that are,
Doing the work.
and with all these projects, I believe that they're catalysts for other economic activity beyond the target or the focus. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right, thank you. So Lynette, do you have additional public comments on this item?
I do. I have 3 written comments that were sent to me that I can go ahead and read into the record now.
Okay, yes, please.
Thank you. The first is from Michael Davila. His statement is, hello, Chair and members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Michael Davila, and I'm a project manager with the City of Sacramento. I want to recognize all SACOG EEI staff, especially Rosie Ramos Gomez and Nicole Zeeling Porter, for their hard work and dedication to this funding program. Inclusion and equity were clear values embedded throughout the program, and the award recommendations reflect those values. I'm here today in support of item number 2, the EEI awards. I urge approval of this item. The City of Sacramento's application for North Sacramento Forward Together brings together a unique collaboration across various city council districts that experience similar challenges. From transportation mobility to climate resiliency, North Sacramento will benefit from the engagement and implementation that will come from this work. The established collaborative will build on this work by looking forward to attracting future funding and investment to continue scaling our impact. Beyond the City of Sacramento's applications, I'm excited to see investment in areas like North Highlands and United Way. Thank you again to SACOG and the EEI care holders for making this opportunity available, and I appreciate the committee's consideration of approval. The second public comment is from Candace Young Fresquez. On behalf of the Hop Sing Tong Association and Marysville Chinese Cultural Preservation, thank you to the SACOG Transportation Committee for your time and consideration in the efforts of the preservation and revitalization of Marysville's Chinatown Blueprint. We are looking forward to what this stepping stone will bring to the community within the city of Marysville and those who visit now and in the future. And Candace is the Secretary in Marysville Chinese Cultural Preservation President. The last public comment is from Mike Costa, Principal Transportation Planner with the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. He says, as a member of the EEI Review Board, I would like to provide my support for staff's recommended action for the Transportation Committee's consideration this morning. While not every project could receive available funding this time around, it should be recognized how this grant funding opportunity highlights the many great efforts and needs being addressed by our partnering public agencies and nonprofit organizations regarding equitable planning and engagement in our decision-making processes throughout the 6-county region. I would also like to recognize SACOG staff for their excellent leadership role in this grant application process, which was conducted in an open, transparent, and very fair manner. The projects being funded with this program will support some true efforts to engage and empower local community groups and stakeholders in our important regional planning processes, while further inspiring our local and regional planning agencies to implement more creative thinking and collaborative strategies for future project development efforts. And that concludes the written comments.
Great, thank you. Any additional board comment or, okay, any motion, please?
Can I add one last
Oh,
thing? Sorry.
Yes.
I really want to highlight the partnership with PCTPA and all of the staff across the region. It was Corey and Mike really met with us. I don't even know how many hours, but a lot of time was spent with them and brainstorming and their time on the review board. A lot of staff, Rancho Cordova, Drew Hart, lots of folks that we've talked along the way. So I just really want to highlight the partnership and time that staff from your jurisdictions gave us. It was really critical to this program and process.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your work on it too. Okay, is there a motion?
I would like to move the item.
Second.
First and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, excellent. So,
Chair Bradford, I know they've heard it already. I just want to thank Rosie and Nicole here because I think this is a great example of when we talk about equity, it's not a one size fits all. If you heard, they've gone out and about. We've spent 3 years on this program, but it really is something that they put their time and their effort and their passion into. And I think it has shown all the way through this, including this morning. So just want to really thank them.
thank you. So next, we're going to move on to the informational items, starting with item number 3, Northern California Mega Region Zero Emission Medium and Heavy Duty Vehicle Study. Morning, Miguel.
Mr. Chair, before we get into this item, I just wanted to give a brief update. Our building has let us know that they may be conducting a fire drill either today or tomorrow. So just a brief overview of our procedures. The stairwell is right behind me. You may hear the sirens from the floor above us or below us first, but the red sirens on the wall will indicate when we need to leave. If you have physical limitations, our staff will stay with you on the floor. And our meeting point is at the southwest corner of Capitol Park, so 15th and L. So we'll be guiding you, but hopefully that doesn't happen in the next hour and a half.
Might be my car.
All right.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Miguel Mendoza, one of the SACOG analysts here, and
happy to present this for you today, though I'm going to be doing very little of the meat of the presentation, but I want to intro this before passing it on to Chris here. So today we have the Northern California Mega Region Medium Heavy Duty Zero Emission Vehicle Study. It's a lot of words. And the origin of this study was a successful Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant, in large part successful because of our partnerships with our mega region agencies, San Joaquin Council of Governments and Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So really a joint effort here on this study. And after the success of the grant, with the board's approval, we went out for a competitive RFP to procure a consultant to really help lead this work. And so, with that in mind, I want to introduce Chris White, who led much of this work and really has the wealth of knowledge and experience in doing this. And so what she'll have is a brief overview, really a highlight, right? This is a long report of the study, its purpose, and what we've been able to accomplish. So with that, Chris, I'll hand it up to you.
Thanks for having me here today. And I also want to make a nod to Rosie as well. This study, we had lots of partners in this, but as we started moving forward with it, we also realized that it couldn't be done in a vacuum. And so we have been working both with Rosie and our county staff and different bike ped plans and looking at safety plans and figuring out how we blend all of these together, because this regional approach to electrification, whether it's an e-bike or as a locomotive, all has to happen together and in step with each other. And so it's been great working together on it. But let me give you just kind of they're giving me, oh, that's speaker one. I was trying to change slides with the microphone, people. The purpose of this study was very specifically in looking at freight. How do we move goods from here to there on the highways when we are using zero emission vehicles? And just for clarity, we are talking about vehicles that plug into the wall, or we were talking about vehicles that use hydrogen and fuel cells. And we were very agnostic to the technology. We really needed to look at this in a framework of where are the big gaps. And those gaps are not just where it needs to be, but where we have gaps in policies and regulations and technology and zoning and equity and all of these other things. It really was to take a look at air quality, but air quality was a part of it. It also means operations and economics and how do we continue to enable our counties and our partners to do what they do. I want to make one mention about how the shift in this project. When it was first proposed, there were no regulations that said thou shalt sell electric trucks. There were no regulations that said thou shalt buy them, and there was no funding to build these stations. We assumed at the very beginning of this project that it would be up to you all, the cities and counties, to put forward your land and your dollars to do this. And as this project got started, that wasn't necessary anymore because we suddenly had a market for it. And so we changed gears a little bit with a very, very participative steering committee to figure out how we enable private investment to make sure that goods can get where they need to go. So now, sorry. The core area of this was along those roads that are our major freight corridors. And that is from lots of SACOG studies and MTC studies and other studies about where freight goes. That map that you're seeing is showing replica data, data that picks up from cell phones and GPSs and shows us where trucks move. And this is isolated to trucks. The darker the color, the more frequent there is in travel. What this does not show you is what happens seasonally in our region, because that line between Santa Cruz and San Jose gets really, really dark when we're harvesting lettuce. That line that is up in Yuba City and the area of north gets really, really dark when we're harvesting stone fruit. And so it does not really show us the seasonality of freight. It shows us the basics overall. So we did expand out from just these corridors to look at those seasonal needs throughout our region as well. So we had 4 steps in this, and I'm going to tell y'all, I am not a data person. I am a people person. I have been working on alternative fuels for 20 years and have been talking to operators and builders and people who move freight around for 20 years about what they need to do to keep moving in business. But we worked with a great team of data experts as well. And so we really did use both what the stories that data told us and the stories that people told us to estimate what we thought will happen in the next 20 years. If I knew what was going to happen in the next 20 years, I would not be sitting with y'all today. So the best thing that we can do is use this existing data to create a picture of what it's going to look like. We also then worked with our communities and with our stakeholders to establish criteria to evaluate locations, basically giving them all a score. Some of those scores meant they dropped out right away. So for instance, if your property was on protected rangeland, we're not going to build a gas station of the future there. So we went through these to winnow down the process, and then we created an implementation plan for each one of the sites. What we agreed with, and that is with these equity groups, it's with our stakeholders, it's with operators, it's with builders, was to look for opportunities in the blue box. Where could we do things to move things forward? What would be rise to the top of our list? And I'll tell you what I tell everybody else too. There were no bad locations. There were some locations that could be developed more quickly and look like they become profitable and sustainable more so than others. The ones that we really toned down on were the ones that were on those protected lands, would require lots and lots of roadway, a new highway exit, would require one of the utilities to bring out an entirely new substation, or it really encroached on personal residences. And this is where we looked a lot at crash data, where we looked at congestion data, where we looked at where somebody might take a shortcut through a neighborhood to get to that truck stops of the future. And we moved away from those. So we started with just over 100 properties and we winnowed them down. As we winnowed down, here are some of the comments that we got from our stakeholders and our community members, and ways that we had to think about their operation. The one that really stood out to many of our steering team was from the drayage operator. A lot of these ZEV stations are based upon the way that drayage works at the Port of Los Angeles. That is not the way that it works at the Port of Oakland. In Los Angeles, a drayage driver may make 4 or 6 trips a day between the port and the warehouse. From the Port of Oakland, they make 1. And we have to think about that, stopping for an hour between where you are and where you're going, which may be as far away as Reno, is a lot of extra work, a lot of extra hours that you are paying a driver to be away from home. So we really thought about that as well too. We also heard consistently that what developers were looking for were a lot of space, as many as 10 acres, and a lot of electricity. And so we needed to make sure our electricity partners could bring that energy there one day soon. So we came down to 11 sites that we decided were appropriate. There were actually more than this, but many of them got claimed along the way, and some of them are already under construction. You'll notice that there's nothing there really in Sacramento itself, and that's because we have 5 stations that are already under development in Sacramento. We have them under development in West Sacramento, some in Stockton, a lot out in the Bay Area. We have a few places that are up near the I-5 heading north in Yolo County. So we stayed away from the places that are having a station being put in already. The market is too small to be building gas stations across the street from each other. They needed to fill gaps. Now, of the 11 that we identified and moved forward with, there were another 6 that got claimed by a developer while we were working on them. One of the things that we talked about in the beginning is, what if we identify a property and somebody comes up and says, I want that one. Maybe we should keep them secret to the end. And then with our SACOG staff, we decided, you know what we would love to have happen? We would love to come here and sit to y'all and say, we don't have a report because we sold every site. We did not sell all of them. We sold a good number. And in fact, since this was released, the 11 that we evaluated, 3 more have been sold and started construction. So we're feeling pretty successful about that, y'all.
And sold as fueling or sold as this?
Developer, in some cases, they actually bought the property and have plans and construction underway. In some cases, they put an option on the property and are getting their funding line up. Some of it's been state funded, some federal funded, a lot of it's private funded. So that is exactly what we wanted to have happen. So what, in our implementation plan, we really took a page from real estate developers, and we said, instead of making something that looks like a technical document, let's make something that makes it attractive to one of these private companies. For Mobility, Watt EV, Renewable Properties, Air Products, Nikola, one of these companies that's building them, and let's give them a real estate package. And that's what we did. So we have this top page. It's kind of like the sexy marketing piece that just attracts them in there. By the way, for anybody who's watching, this one's been sold. You can't buy this one anymore. Page 2 is kind of getting into the technical details for our developers. What would it look like if you property in here? Can you meet the setbacks? How much power do you need to bring in? What does it look like? That bottom chart that's the bar graph actually shows you what our forecast of baseload growth is in the region. How many vehicles do we think are coming in there? They're going to need your fuel. We've listed the potential baseload users, which was a really big deal for many of our developers. And then also just talk kind of generally, what do you need to think about this? We've also shown you a map of where this would be in location to other planned and proposed locations. And then our third page gives us more of what we needed at the city or county level. What does this look like overall in our community bucket? Which community groups did we engage about this? Who needs to be engaged further? Did it sit in Cal EnviroScreen? What would be the economic impact of moving this? What are the benefits? What are some of the local needs? Does it need to go to CEQA? Does it need NEPA? Is it zoned correctly? So a little bit more about what we need to think about from a community to do this. So this has proven to be really popular. But I didn't tell you, as one of our goals too, was to make sure that SACOG got as well known for this plan as you did for the blueprint. And that has happened. We have had a lot of requests to present this information. A lot of our format and the way that we did this was folded into California's successful CFI grant. We are seeing this process folded into some other things as well. And I have groups really, really excited for this report to get out so that they can start sharing it. So I mentioned the results is the developers have claimed 3 additional sites, and it's been 2 more since this. So we've now had 5 claimed. We have brokers that are actually listing their commercial properties for sale on LoopNet on their websites and showing the ZEV potential. That was a big important piece, is that they've talked about that in these things. We also really did a lot about increasing the needs awareness in agriculture, and this is directly translated to some outreach events that's going on with agriculture related businesses and looking at how we help them, because that freight, like I've said before, is so seasonal and folks move differently. We've also been working with CARB to get some exemptions for trucks that on the Advanced Clean Fleet regulations for trucks that move cattle, because it is a very, very, very specific type of truck, and it will be very hard to move cattle trucks into ZEVs. We're taking action on a bunch of zoning issues that will remove some other barriers. And that has been super interesting, and so interesting for me on a personal note that when we got into this, I changed jobs from energy engineering, and I went to work for Kittleson, that is transportation engineering, so I could work on some of those other barriers. And we're already making some progress, and I'm really excited about that. So we put together a plan that is not you, Yuba County, build one, you Winters, build one, you Lincoln, build one. It is a plan about what can you do to position your city, your county for economic development so that someone else can come and bring this to you and help your local fleets enable their own transition to zero emission vehicles. And that is it for me. And I am ready. Ask me your tough question. I'm ready.
So I'll start off then. So first, your passion for this is amazing. So it just oozes out as you're presenting. So thank you so much. I think you've answered this question, but I kind of just want clarification. So these are sites that, as part of the study, you've identified. They're privately owned. They're at least maybe mostly zoned to allow this kind of thing. But not solely this kind of thing, but they're being marketed as a great spot for this kind of thing. Is that a kind of an understanding of the nature of the properties?
It is, but I want to make a caveat too, is that many of these are for sale.
Okay.
So they are development properties, they are properly zoned, so they won't have to go back and get an exemption to put in a truck-related business. Some of them are kind of interesting little niches. So the one I'm gonna call out on Pedrick Road in Dixon, that is currently a farm. And it is a distribution site for hay. And folks bring hay from all over the region to that location. And so it is serving specifically hay trucks. And that owner is someone that we interviewed for this, and he said, I want to make my property, I'm tearing down this whole building. I've planned to put truck parking here. I would like to make it available to somebody who wants to buy it. That one has been purchased. So 2 of these are actually Caltrans properties. And they are in areas that it's very, very hard to develop. One of them's in South Lake Tahoe. And so we have proposed something quite different for those Caltrans properties and how they might transition to what they're doing today to what they could do tomorrow and enable first their own fleet and then later some other selected fleets to come in there.
Awesome. Thank you. Other board comments or questions?
I want to mention that this was freight, but we also looked at transit and how we would enable regional transit. We also looked at tourism. So when the guys were talking about the Marysville place, I have a place for that bus to charge. It's in our plan. It's right there on Sutter Street.
These locations you're looking at, would they be primarily for trucks?
Our aim was to look for places that freight trucks could come in. So that would almost be like a semi truck with a detached trailer, not a van or a little truck.
Like you see along
Many
the
of the
highway, big truck stops.
Right. And big truck stops, little truck stops, medium-sized truck stops. Many of the developers' choice would be to have, like today's travel plazas are, fueling island for trucks, fueling island for cars, and potentially other businesses.
The comments that you showed early on, where a trucker is going to have to stand by for an hour. I'd be surprised if it was only an hour because the trucks can have a lot of batteries.
I agree with you on that. And one of the recommendations in our plan is something that we're moving forward with. The state of California offers a workforce development tax credit that just protects an employer for somebody who needs to go for job training. We believe that that tax credit could be extended to a business to cover the hours that they might have to spend charging.
And anyway, this needs a heavy economic analysis. It sounds very expensive. And we're already burdened in California with an extra $1 plus a gallon. Imagine the impact on the economy if we didn't have to spend that extra $1 a gallon. Now, I don't know if you're familiar, but I'd recommend attention to articles published by my former colleague, Mark Mills. He's with the Manhattan Institute now. And he has done an in-depth analysis. I mean, the mining that would have to happen on the planet just to address the goals of the ZEV advocates would be enormous. He'd be scratching up most of the surface of the earth, in his view. But he also comes up with a ratio. For every gasoline or diesel fuel pump, you would have to have at least 9 charging stations, because we can fill our cars or trucks with fuel in not much time. But, and most of them have longer ranges. And so you have a shorter range and a much longer fueling time. You're not going to be able to get away with the same number of fueling apparatus. You're going to need 9 times minimum, 9 times as many. And that presents a real problem. That's a real estate problem. It's a time problem for the people who have to charge. It's an economic problem for businesses that have to pay for that extra time. So I worry deeply about the ZEV policies that are really driven by the Air Resources Board and the economics. I think anything presented needs an economic study, an objective economic study. How much added cost, because this is all added cost. This is not going to be less expensive than what's happening now with traditional fueling. It's going to be dramatically more expensive. And without that, how can it be really objectively reviewed? So I think that's your big challenge. I understand your passion and your goal, but you want to make sure if you've got an objective goal, that it's not being approached subjectively because of a desire to rid the planet of pollution from vehicles.
I appreciate those
My
comments. Thank
and
you.
with respect.
Dr. Haberstroh?
You know, I know PCTPA has been looking for a site in the area of 65 and 80. What coordination have you done with other transportation agencies on this study?
You bet. In fact, we worked with them very closely and with Jacobs in the plan that they were doing, and we had the 5 locations they were considering already mapped out in this. We did have early on some other locations that were up a little bit further along 80. In fact, you'll see the Nyack Road, that's where the Shell station is right now. That is really the only available property to develop something like this on that entire stretch of 80.
And then you mentioned something about, I forget which form of agriculture, protected something?
Oh, protected lands, where we have protected lands.
But if a habitat conservation plan or natural communities conservation plan has that roadway as a covered project, would you then consider that?
So one of our.
I mean, if it's an interchange or something.
It's a great question, and it's something we've actually talked about, and specifically with PCTPA is the rezoning of some of that land. We were looking for things that would not have to go through a rezoning process. And, you know, some of those are, when I say protected lands, I mentioned rangelands. It's also wetlands and it's national forests. We have a surprising number of protected lands, and a lot of our protected land is agriculture related. And it is protected, it can only be agriculture. I do too. I live in Yolo County, an agricultural preserve, so yes.
Any additional board comment or question? Yes.
I'm sort of curious about private sector engagement here. I think, you know, that would be the preference as opposed to public sector trying to manage or invest in these kind of facilities. What's driving the public or the private sector investment at this point? Is it all based on federal grants to build these sort of facilities?
We talked to many of the developers, not all of them, but both hydrogen fuel station developers and the folks that are building these big charging stations. Some of them are motivated by federal funding. Others are motivated because it is an opportunity for them to also produce and sell electricity. And
Oh,
so
sure.
they are looking at they see a business case, and it is an unusual business case that it's interesting to wrap your head around, how they can become a wholesaler, kind of like the Calpine plant that we have up in Sutter County. You know, they make power and they sell it to other folks. Well, some of these places that they're building stations are so large, they're able to use solar energy to charge batteries and then sell that energy on a regular demand basis to, you know, invent your utility here, but the CCAs can buy that power. So they are seeing a business case in power, and NextEra Energy is one of the developers of battery charging stations that is not taking federal or state funds. They are building it so they can become a power producer.
Yeah, it's an interesting business case. You know, I think more challenging is the fact that we don't have any vehicles to do this hauling yet.
Agreed.
Right? There are no over-the-road trucks that have batteries that are chargeable, that are
Agreed.
in use, right?
Although I will tell you that Cummins today set a record, and they ran their hydrogen fuel cell vehicle 1,081 miles without stopping.
Hydrogen would be the exception. I was sort of talking about electrical
Yeah.
side there. So, next question I got, and I could go on too long about this, so I'll restrict myself. On the hydrogen side, you know, the large oil companies out there have assets that they're already deploying towards trying to produce hydrogen. There's a lot of different ways to produce hydrogen, green hydrogen, et cetera. But it seems like they already have a distribution network. Hydrogen is a pretty quick way to fuel. Why wouldn't we just be using existing facilities as opposed to building new for hydrogen?
Well, as the driver of a hydrogen fuel cell car for the last 7 years, I can give you a little bit of an answer on that. One of the things we learned early on with hydrogen is we said, look how much we're making nationwide. You know what? It's made to order. Most of it is committed already to customers. And if a facility goes down in Texas, our hydrogen supply goes there. So they are not making excess that's just laying out there waiting for somebody to buy it. So we've seen that happen. And it is great that we have some new hydrogen production facilities that are coming online that will be dedicated to transportation. The problem is hydrogen still costs too much. I don't pay, it comes with my car, but it's $30 a kilogram, which is ridiculous. But the new Arches Hydrogen Hub initiative has a goal of getting that to 3. 3 is amazing. So, and
It seems like, and I'm a scientist, it just seems like hydrogen is the better choice here. So I worry when we're going so heavy on EVs. And, you know, I spoke at a European conference last year, and it was a relatively high profile thing. I was National League of Cities president, right? Speaking at this thing. And afterwards, the French Minister of Energy, the Swiss Minister of Energy, the Brazilian Minister of Environment kind of cornered me, and they said, what is going on in the United States? Why are you doing this weird EV thing? And I said, we can only do one thing at a time. That's how we think. We got a problem. We got one solution. That's the only one we can possibly think of at a time. That has to get like knocked off the shelf before we can consider something else. And they said, you guys are nuts. You know, this EV thing, there isn't enough lithium to do that. There's the electrical grid infrastructure necessary is massive. You know, you're not building any additional grid. This is not going to work. Why aren't you doing hydrogen? And I said, that's a great idea. I agree.
Doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
Kind of I don't think there's any one thing that's going to save us all. I think as we get to it, if we truly want to be energy independent and green and sustainable, it is going to take all fuels. It's also going to take driving less and putting more things on trains and riding your bike. It takes all of those things to get us where we want to be.
So I'd love to see, you know, private sector investment in hydrogen. I'd love to see over the road trucks that can run on hydrogen. That just seems like an easier step, a less intensive step with regard to material usage. Because material usage on the EV side is pretty extreme, you know, the weight of the vehicles, et cetera. So do you see any big roadblocks to more hydrogen? And would all of these facilities be necessary if it was a hydrogen sort of economy we were talking about instead of an EV?
You know, again, in each one of the locations we looked at, we didn't dictate which thing should go there. We really looked at how we plug gaps. And in each one of these places, no matter if you're running on batteries or fuel cells or orange juice or flux capacitors, each one of these is a place where you are going to run out of fuel somewhere and are going to need something to fill your tank.
Well,
So, yeah.
I mean, hydrogen can be produced from water. And so, and again, hydrogen, I completely agree. Hydrogen is a much better approach. Fueling time, everything. You don't have to make something, you don't have to add tons. You'll have to probably add tons of weight to a long haul truck in terms of batteries. And then you have a truck that already weighs a lot, and then add the cargo. There isn't a guardrail in the world that will ever hold one of those things on a road. And the danger to other traffic will be enormous. When Elon goes to hydrogen, then we'll know hydrogen's ready. No, I mean that. It's hydrogen isn't quite ready for prime time in any kind of volumes, but there are people who know where to pace things. Electric in the doses that we're getting now makes sense. It works. In California, was it 100% electric vehicles after 2035? Isn't that what the Air Resources Board wants?
It is sold.
That's insane in my view.
It is.
And absolutely insane. And so you've got to follow the market. And again, hydrogen will work, and the pricing should be attractive on that fuel too once it's done in volume. So I completely agree with your approach.
Mr. Chairman, I move that SACOG nominate Dr. Sanders to the Air Resources Board, send a letter of
Oh,
support.
please, please. That'd be a tough assignment.
Well, I know
Excellent.
we're way over time on this, and so I do want to thank you all for the opportunity to work on this. And I got to give shout out to Miguel, who has been the most awesome program manager. And we were just sitting there, we were talking we were talking about how lucky you are to have, how SACOG is to have him, and how lucky all of his clients are to have him, including me. And I'm gonna sure miss talking to Miguel, so
Don't be a
looking for
stranger.
your next RFP.
Don't be a stranger.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Chris.
so much.
If we find another cause, I want you in charge.
Okay.
And, Chair Bradford, I know just being on the mega region working group, I just want to, what we really appreciate with this and the project manager and Miguel is we've taken the interest in the mega region working group, right? That's a very high level, heavy duty, medium duty. How are we going to prepare for this? And I so appreciate this is really digging down, right, into actual sites, into actual sales of those sites and seeing if there could be a market on that. So it's on us now to make sure that we distribute this. It sounds like that's already happening, but it's a different kind of a study for us, just with this level of specificity. So, and I do think it really helps that mega region interest across the 16 counties on heavy and medium duty. So, just great job with the team.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I know this is not an action item, but Lynette, just double checking, no public comment to your knowledge on this item?
There is no public
Okay,
comment on
great.
this item.
Then we'll move on to item 4, the 2025, also an informational item, 2025 blueprint, draft final information, final transportation project list and performance. Morning, Zach.
Pardon me, Chair, is that what this is for?
Yes.
This is an eye chart.
It was
Director
distributed
Branscombe,
to,
That item was, that attachment, sorry, Chair Bradford.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to explain that. That attachment was included in your agenda packet. There's no changes. But it was difficult. We understood from some of our members that it was a little bit difficult to read online. And unfortunately, some of the information in the cells looked like they were cut off. So we're just providing that Excel spreadsheet in front of you.
If I
Yeah.
may just address the packet and this amount of data. I don't call this information. This is data. It's information when it's explained in English, right? I mean, when something is shared like this, are we really expected to go over every
Yeah.
page?
Yeah, this is just us being transparent. So this is the item is the project list, right? So these are the projects. So you're not expected to read.
Well,
through
I
it.
presume that was the
Yeah.
case.
But if anybody asked a question, said, where's the information? Our
Data.
job is to make sure that you have access to it.
Just to kind of follow on to that, I certainly didn't read everything in the list, but I will tell you, I went to all the ones that said Yuba County and I read them, and I imagine my fellow directors did the same thing. So
I'm not so self-serving.
I also read Marysville and Wheatland, just so you know, so.
That's okay. Thank you.
Get a gold star.
Yeah, well,
All right, good morning, members of the board. Zach Miller, I'm the 2025 Blueprint Program Manager. So today I'm going to be sharing with you what we've been doing to revise the transportation project list since the October committee meetings, how the revised transportation project list performs relative to the triple bottom line goals, how we're faring relative to achieving the greenhouse gas target for the region. And finally, I'll be sharing the staff recommendation for the transportation project list. So to note, I will be giving this presentation to Lunar, where an action on the staff recommendation will be taken in the form of that committee deciding whether or not to recommend that the board adopt the transportation project list on November 14th.
May I ask a question at this stage, just very quickly? I understand there's a difference of opinion between SACOG and Caltrans on how to approach this. Could you highlight along the way so we can understand that? And I'm hoping Caltrans will make a presentation and highlight so we can understand where these differences converge.
I think maybe I'll go through my presentation and then we can have the comment letter read and then we can address specific questions related to the.
That would be perfect.
At the end. Yeah. Okay. So for the purposes of this presentation, however, this is simply an information item for this committee here today. The action will be taken up later this afternoon. So jumping into the agenda here, I'll be starting with a summary of the engagement that staff has conducted since October committees. I'll then provide a summary of the progress on the triple bottom line as it relates to the draft final scenario, which again is the combined board adopted land use assumptions with this draft final transportation project list under consideration here today. And then I'll be getting into how the draft final scenario performs relative to the greenhouse gas target. Then I'll provide you with the staff recommendation for your informational purposes, and then I'll finish off with the next steps in the process. So at committees in October, staff received specific feedback that they should do two things. One, continue to account for local priorities and input by continuing to work with transportation project sponsors to further refine the project list. And then two, not compromise the region's ability to remain within striking distance of our greenhouse gas target for the region. So using this direction, staff held additional meetings with transportation sponsors to gather more information on projects for the draft final transportation project list. So SACOG staff worked to accommodate changes proposed by local staff where there was new information on projects aligned with the triple bottom line policy objectives, on projects that could be paid for by reasonably foreseeable revenues in the timeframe of our plan out to 2050, and then also where local resources are already paying for improvements. So staff and project sponsors made every effort to prioritize and include transportation projects that were identified as local priorities by sponsors. However, we were not able to accommodate all requests for road and highway capacity projects to be included without eroding the plan's performance in key areas, most notably the greenhouse gas reduction target for the region. So finally, on the engagement front, during the second round of engagement that's been happening since, beginning of August or September, SACOG did not directly hear back from all project sponsors throughout the region. So we proactively identified and reached out to sponsors that had not provided any feedback or comment on the transportation project list during that time frame to ensure that their understanding of that they understood what was being included in the list, as well as that their priorities were being as accurately reflected as possible. So that brings us to where we are here today, the staff recommendation for the transportation investments. So as a brief refresher, staff began by screening the full list of nominated projects to determine those that would best serve the land use pattern that was adopted by this board in June. So this screening process was rooted in the triple bottom line goals and yielded the first iteration of the transportation project list. So as a reminder, we received roughly double the amount in proposed roadway and highway capacity projects as reasonably foreseeable revenue and funding for this major project category. So we had to make some difficult choices here. So when we went through that extensive sponsor engagement process, from which the feedback received during that process was used to identify local priorities and refine the transportation project list. So the list that you see in front of you here today, or the data you see in front of you here today, is the fourth iteration of that list, which includes 3 cycles of transportation sponsor feedback and input on the list. So it's important to note that local priorities and feedback were collected and considered in the context of those musts that I had that are up here now of fiscal constraint and achieving the greenhouse gas target. So as I mentioned before, not all requests by project sponsors were added into the project list. So getting into the progress on the triple bottom line and some of the metrics that feed into that triple bottom line. So nested within the triple bottom line are goal statements, which provide additional details of how the 2025 blueprint should support those goals of equity, economy, and the environment. The table before you includes a number of performance metrics that correspond with and show performance relative to those goal statements. So on the whole, you can see that the scenario in front of you here today would go a long way in improving and expanding transportation alternatives available to the region's population. And it would also improve their access and proximity to jobs and services. Also, this would improve equity across the region through improving many of the metrics in the table, specifically in environmental justice areas. And it would also result in better environmental outcomes in terms of transportation efficiency as well as emissions. Now getting into the greenhouse gas performance relative to the greenhouse gas target that we have for the region. So now I'm going to be getting into just how the final scenario performs.
Sure.
Yes.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, jobs within a 30-minute drive, is that the AM or the peak? That's the AM peak? Is that how that's defined? Because I got here in less than 30 minutes this morning.
I
And feel like
would
this is my
imagine, I
job
don't know
today.
the answer to that question. I would imagine it'd be on average though.
Okay.
But we can get back to you with that specific information.
I can help with that.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's not about certain times of day. It's just within a general 30-minute drive, like how many jobs can you get to? So it's built off of average households.
So Plumas Lakes to North Natomas probably works, right?
Yes, it's what can you get to?
Okay.
Pardon me, speaking to, if using an average, you're talking about workers, you're talking about commute times. It should be focused on commute times.
And we
Because
can get back
everything
to you.
says workers there. I'm missing, okay, there's a couple lines that doesn't say worker, but when you're talking workers,
We
that's
can get
commute
that.
hours.
We can get that.
We'll look into that and get back to you on the specific inputs that went into that. Uh-huh. All right, so the table on the screen in front of you includes all of the land use as well as transportation inputs that staff has included, as well as additional greenhouse gas reduction strategies that were needed to achieve that target. So starting with the land use and transportation category on the table in front of you, the land use assumptions adopted by the board in June of this year are incorporated into this modeling. The staff recommended transportation project list before you hear today is included, as well as carrying forward the mileage-based user fee from the 2020 plan. Next, under the GHG reduction strategies, these are all the additional GHG reduction strategies that are needed to be included in order to achieve that greenhouse gas target, and are also strategies that were included in the 2020 version of this plan. So these strategies are those that we as staff see as feasible and necessary to remain within striking distance of the greenhouse gas target. And it's important to note here that the 2020 MTP-SCS was adopted by our board and approved by the California Air Resources Board. So these are GHG strategies that we as staff have a high level of confidence in for helping us achieve the target. So as you can see here on this table, based on the board adopted land use assumptions, the transportation project list before you here today, and the identified additional greenhouse gas reduction strategies being included, we're calculating that the region will achieve the greenhouse gas target just barely. Staff believe that the reduction strategies and approach to calculating the greenhouse gas performance of the plan in front of you here today represent a sound and defensible case to demonstrate that the plan would achieve that state mandated greenhouse gas reduction target. However, as noted on the slide here in front of you off on the margin there, it is important to note that the California Air Resources Board must ultimately review and approve SACOG's GHG calculation methodology and confirm that the GHG strategies and confirm that those GHG strategies as well as the calculation methodology. So SACOG staff has provided CARB with documentation outlining these strategies and our quantification approach. And these conversations are ongoing and could potentially affect the performance of the plan, creating some risk given the small margin by which we're achieving our target. And staff is committed to keeping the board appraised of any potential changes that would jeopardize the plan's ability to hit this greenhouse gas target, including options for addressing any potential erosion of the plan's performance if that were to occur. So then we'll get to the staff recommendations. So this transportation project list is staff and project sponsors' best attempt to achieve the triple bottom line policy goals of the plan, incorporate priorities of the transportation project sponsors, and set the plan up to achieve the greenhouse gas target. So staff recommended, staff recommendation that will be brought to Lunar today is that staff recommends that the SACOG Board of Directors adopt the final transportation project list, which is included as Appendix A of your packet, to be part of the final preferred scenario for the 2025 blueprint. And then just getting into some next steps. So following hopeful adoption of the transportation project list, staff will begin drafting of the 2025 blueprint plan document, and the board will turn to developing the policies of that plan. So this will occur in parallel with development of the environmental impact report for the plan, and the draft 2025 blueprint. That plan document, as well as the EIR, are planned to be released for public review in May or so of 2025. And then plan adoption is scheduled for November of 2025. So with that, I would like to open it up to any questions.
Before we take board commenting questions, which they may or may not take a while, I'd like to go ahead and take the public comment that we have on this item, and then we'll move it back to the board for additional discussion. So I've got 2 cards here. So first of all, John from the City of Galt.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I'm John Griffin, Director of Public Works with the City of Galt. I want to recognize and thank the Blueprint team, Sam, Zach, and Hannah specifically for their hard work and collaboration with the City of Galt. I know they put a lot of hard work into this effort over the last several years and the challenges they are trying to tackle head on to meet the objectives. I want to take a minute here to speak out in support of the city's projects that are on the Blueprint. The city has seen a significant amount of growth, not only residential, but also commercial and industrial. These city projects are several critical projects that will improve both walkability and alternate modes of transportation in the city, and also allow us to move forward with the environmental engineering efforts for our second modern interchange within the city. So having said that, on behalf of the City of Galt, we support the 2025 blueprint list. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next up, we have Mr. Targia. Did I say that right? Or is it Gia? Targia.
Thank you. Many professors go, Jeff, I'm here. This is my 3rd meeting where City Council, County Board of Supervisors, and now I am here. The 2 reasons I am here and talking about this and not at public comment is because what I want to encourage you as Transportation Board of what you report back to your bodies. One of the things I am trying to encourage at RT is what SACOG does beyond funding is what comes out. So appreciate hearing, and know that I can now see this when you're on your YouTube and everything else, see what actually actions go on and the interactions that take place. The other thing that doesn't happen at all boards is the clerk reading the written comments. Appreciate that of SACOG. Appreciate the fact that when I first started with James, I had to buy the material through here to find out what was going on, and being literally the only public that showed up at your meetings, well, what was going on and happening. And that's what I'm here to say is because when you change from 2025 to 2027, not everybody realized that. And that's something I don't know whether you've focused and reminded people about, that you are right now just doing things and what happened out of your 3035 legislation and the further efforts of going, I believe, to your choice of number 2. I missed the October meeting, so have not gone back and read it with other things that are happening going on. But that's what my public comment is about here is that, again, what you guys turn around and tell your local boards and your other entities. I think we're having an alarm.
In a moment, maybe.
We'll see where it's directed, or just a small area.
Do we take?
Okay. But thank you. That's me into my public comment.
Thank you. Okay, any additional public comment before we move to board comment, or would now be a good time to read?
I just, Chair Bradford, I would just point out that we just mentioned that we distributed 2 written comments. The written comments are available on our website, on the table for the public, and then at your seats.
Okay, so we'll start board discussion, may be interrupted. We'll see. Oh, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have 2 letters in front of us, I believe, on this item. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I'm gonna request an impossible task. Trying to figure out what page number these comments refer to. I know.
The, right.
Go ahead. No,
The
no.
public comments are included on our website with the Transportation Committee packet. If you click on the 3 blue dots, you scroll down, there's the presentation, which are the PowerPoints, and then the handouts.
I'm
which
looking
are-
at the handout here.
Oh, I misunderstood.
Yeah, okay,
See.
so let's, you're asking which project
Trying to find.
is the
Yeah.
Caltrans letter referring to?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, let's try to get you an answer to that in real time.
I'm
Stand
trying to
by.
find,
Sure, they're on the transportation committee.
yeah, I was trying to find Cal 2082_B.
So it may not equal to this, and I'm not sure there's page numbers on this, but I did a search in Excel and it came up on page 24. So I don't know if that's helpful.
That is very helpful. I tried to do,
You say,
I tried to
did
do
you say you were
Control
looking for
F.
20828B?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I tried to
Excel
do
tells me it's
Control
on
F
page
on here.
24, so.
All right, I'll resume my silence.
No page numbers.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Okay, morning, everybody. So I'll just start off by saying I was fortunate enough to receive the offer and accept the position as permanent District 3 Director.
Congratulations.
And thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. And as one of my first actions was to send this letter out. It wasn't, shall we say, the way I wanted to get going. But I do think I owe it to this board, the Land Use Committee, and really the SACOG family at large, an explanation as to how we got here. Really, we're talking about 4 projects. These are 4 managed lanes projects. One is State Route 99, south of the 50 interchange. 2 are along the US 50 corridor headed east, and one of them is I-5 south. This actually was something that frankly was even new to me. We were working with SACOG on the project descriptions, like every other agency, right? We submit projects with descriptions as to what these are about. And everything was, as far as we knew, okay. And then the 15th of October was the first time we heard, hey, these are being changed. And we're like, well, why? And we understand the triple bottom approach. We understand the GHG targets that we want to achieve. So we started a back and forth dialogue with SACOG staff, and I appreciate James and your staff for engaging with us on that. And realistically, the crux of the matter for us is we have experience doing this. We obviously do large projects in this region and across the state. We've just, in fact, got done completing the YOLO 80 managed lanes that's going to go to construction here hopefully pretty soon. And we have to follow, obviously, as a public agency, the law. And because of the size of our projects, because of the size of our organization and the impact that it has on communities across multiple jurisdictions, we get looked at a lot. In fact, YOLO 80, it's no news. We've got 2 lawsuits on our hands. Nothing to be concerned about. We feel obviously that we're okay there. And I'm not going to talk about litigation, but my point is we get sued. Because of that, we have to follow certain policies and procedures. And because of that, we have to follow CEQA and NEPA regulations. And all that we are asking is to allow for a robust discussion. Because when we're talking about managed lanes projects, back to what's been discussed in this board many times, we have to look at a broad range of ideas. What is the purpose and need of that project? How are we gonna meet that purpose and need? Are we gonna add lanes? Are we gonna convert? Are we gonna convert to? Those are decisions that even though we are the owner operators of the system, I need to have a robust discussions with all the important stakeholders, all of them. And that's a commitment that I make to everybody. All that I am asking here is leave the descriptions generic enough to allow us to have that involvement. Because if we don't, it undermines that downstream discussion, because obviously once this plan gets approved, it is the plan, right? And they're gonna say, well, Sergio, Caltrans-led project, say SAC 50, you've already made it pretty clear in there in the description that you're gonna do dual managed lanes without expansion. That's what it says, by the way, if you look at it. And so this whole thing, when we get to actually starting that project, spending state resources on the environmental phase to move that project forward, they're gonna say this whole thing is a sham, Sergio. Come on, you're gonna do dual managed lanes without expanding, right? Well, no, then why did you describe it that way? And basically, all that we are asking for, and it ties to, I think, 3 of those 4 projects, is just get rid of the word dual. We're down to 1 word. We're saying managed lanes without expansion. I have acquiesced and moved to the point of saying, I will not expand the system anymore, if that's the desire abroad, but just get rid of the word dual. We are very flexible. And by the way, back to how this started on the 15th, we had totally different descriptions. We had more vague descriptions. If you look at Yellow 80 managed lanes, for example, project, it was very generic before the environmental document. After environmental document, after we go through the environmental process, absolutely. We got the preferred alternative, we'll put it in that list, we're all good to go. Before the environmental process, we need to have those descriptions generic. You can look at the 2020 MTP list for Yellow 80, and it says managed lanes project. This one, it's even more specific. It says toll managed lanes projects, dual toll lanes, no expansion. I'm just trying to get rid of the word dual. I believe that can allow for modeling of this as needed to be for GHG purposes. And we should be good to go that way. Furthermore, even as compromising even greater on the state side, I've said, okay, if we get to the point, for whatever the reason, that we agree to disagree, I understand that everybody wants their projects on this list. I get it, and I know why, and it makes sense because of the funding and showing it as a high priority. But I said, okay, if this is such an issue for SACOG, for me to have these projects that, by the way, are the good for the greater good of this community, for the future of CARTA, and I can go on and on why. But if that's such a big issue, fine, then let's just pull the projects. Let's pull the projects, and I'm good with that. So at this point, I am to the point of, no, we have to keep these projects and we have to keep the description. So at some point you start saying, well, is Caltrans the owner operator of the system or not, right? I've explained myself as to why we need these descriptions. It's CEQA, it's NEPA, it's public engagement. It's all the things that we need to do for these major projects. And yet we've been unable to reach this compromise. I wish, frankly, we would have started this discussion earlier. Again, it didn't come to my attention until mid-October. Had we started in August or September, maybe we could have had a more robust discussion and allow us to come to a resolution. But at this point, that's how we got to this letter. And anyway, hopefully that helps.
Question.
Yeah.
Your objection is dual.
Yes.
Now, why? I did.
Yeah.
I know you're speaking. I just didn't pick up on exactly why.
Absolutely, because at that point, we have been very clear and specific as to how we're going to achieve that managed lanes objective. Because managed lanes objective obviously is to improve that corridor, right? Objectively say, improve the operations and safety of that corridor, everything, right? And if I say dual now, by the way, it also says without adding capacity.
I understood that.
Yeah, so when you get to that point, we have now said, we have chosen our preferred alternative. I'm gonna take that lane and I'm gonna convert them. What are you starting in the environmental process? It's done.
And out of how many lanes? I mean,
It
because
depends.
this is specific as to certain
Correct.
pathways.
Yeah.
So
I can
2
give-
out of how many?
Yeah, it depends on the segment. I think some are 4 lanes or 5 lanes, some are less, but yeah. It
4
depends
lanes in
on-
each direction.
Yeah, per direction, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the discretion would be per direction, correct?
Well, I'd be interested to know how that affects traffic, because is it gonna force people into paying to drive that roadway in order to get from point A to point B?
Thank you very much for that question. Absolutely it would. And that's why we want to leave it generic. That's why we don't want to be so prescriptive, because right now, I'm basically talking about monetizing the state's highway system, right?
Well, this is a concern I've had when we've discussed managed lanes, is that it would turn into a money pot for its board of directors and interested parties. And this seems, and with no, I'm not criticizing SACOG. I think SACOG is living within the hard parameters set down by the Air Resources Board. And so they're trying to make something work. On that chart we saw earlier, 19, we're at +1, plus 0.1, right?
Chair, sorry, Grant.
Yeah.
Nope, nope.
I just, because we want to have a good discussion on this, right? I think your points, as always, are very fair. I think.
I'm not done.
Well, hold on, I just want to, I think the question, and you know, we and I talked this morning, it feels in the weeds, right? The question is not so much what's the ultimate project to build in these corridors? The question is actually about how we describe them in the plan. And so it's because we can spend a lot of time, right, that as CARTA is doing, on the look and feel of the MLSP and what are all the options. The question really is, we have to be specific in our plan. That's what we've just done to meet our greenhouse gas target. Now, what level of specificity do we list in the plan? And does that require Caltrans to build what's in the plan? The question is really a process question, procedural question, a federal planning regulation question, not necessarily which projects and what do they look like at the end of the day.
Well, I do understand both sides, And Caltrans has a compelling argument, as you do, from different perspectives. He's got a perspective he has to honor, and yours is driven, SACOG's is driven by the Air Resources Board. Almost everything we do is to stay within the structure that's been put together by the Air Resources Board. Land use planning, transportation, that's 15 point something of the 19. So I understand that, but I also understand this. When there's 4 lanes there for a reason, because there's a lot of traffic, particularly at commute hours. And so if you're going to take 2 of them and make people pay to use those, there's some economics to be considered. Not just the economics of, and your problem with this is you don't want dual mentioned, you want to be flexible. And exactly why on that again?
Good question, because we could end up with one. We could end up with different alternatives to how we get here. It gives us flexibility to truly.
How we get where?
Oh,
To the Air Resources Board?
No. My focus is not the Air
You're
Resources
blind to
Board.
Air Resources Board, okay.
My focus is the listing being consistent with what ultimately gets built and giving us that flexibility as to what we're gonna do at the ultimate 1 lane or 2 lanes or none, what have you. We need to have those descriptions to be generic enough so that at the project level, we can then choose a preferred alternative.
Here's where I end up. I'm not certain the difference of opinion, I won't call it a conflict. The difference of opinion is clear enough or resolvable that I do look at, I'm on the SACOG board. And so my obligation is to SACOG. It's also to understand the problems with what we might be doing. But if SACOG does not hit that target, then we can dollarize the downside there. And it's a lot of money, because I forget how much it is, but it's billions, right? And so we can dollarize the downside of not hitting that target. And so how, if further discussions are required, I'd encourage them, how can that be done in a manner that doesn't make Caltrans lose sleep at night. And I understand your problem. I totally do. But from the pure SACOG point of view, we've got to hit 19% or we lose billions of dollars. And so that puts you in a hard position in this negotiation.
And I just want to let you know, we do have our environmental attorney who's on the line, who's
Yeah.
happy to answer questions, because from a process perspective, I think the question, sirs, you're right, is does specific listing of a project in our plan prejudge or pre-bias going into an EIR, right? That's essential.
That's one of it. The other part of it is, like I said, at the end of the day, I mean, any of these public agencies, if I was to tell you, I'm gonna take your project, change the description, and oh, by the way, you still can't pull it, it will be the description, who would be happy with it?
I just want to say,
That's really
You're-
what's going on.
you're required as an MPO to adopt a plan. The projects have to be specific. This is what you do. This is your bread and butter. Every agency, all of your public works directors, we have specific projects in a plan. Our belief, and again, Amy is on the line, our belief is that does not put any litigation risk at any of you. You don't have to choose what's in the plan. You go through an AIR, you pick something different, we come back in and we amend the plans.
Yeah.
So what's in the plan though is what's modeled from a GHG standpoint. So if you potentially take dual out of the plan, then dual is not modeled in the GHG modeling and we potentially miss our greenhouse gas target. Is that correct? And we do believe that it has to say dual in order to model that. Is that correct?
Right, why?
Is there potential?
Because even just because we don't, sorry to interrupt.
No,
Chair,
you're good. I think
that
it's perfect.
It's just to build upon that. I'm trying to find a way here that we could thread the needle in the sense that if we describe it in general, so just said managed lanes, why can't we model it that way? Just because it doesn't say dual doesn't mean it isn't going to be dual. It doesn't say it's not going to be dual either. So I'm curious as to, you know, where is the direct requirement to have, because I also, and we'd love to hear the environmental attorneys, because I also understand the pre-decisional concern as well. And I think all of us put our projects in a programmatic sense, right? So I'm wondering, we don't. So okay, that's good to know. So yeah.
I'll answer just briefly and then I'll ask Amy to answer from the CEQA perspective. The tact that we took for the 2020 plan was to use a more vague language that said managed lanes.
Okay.
We then have to, there's the greenhouse gas. We also have to model for the Federal Clean Air Act. We got criticism from the federal government saying your project list that we use, because they don't see the model, right? The model is right, it's software. They're not looking through line by line in the model. They are looking to the project list as a representation of what you modeled for achieving both the greenhouse gas target and your Clean Air Act requirements. When you can't see the nexus between what was actually modeled and the project list, that becomes a problem when we go to interagency consultation, when we do anything on the air quality side. Both the state of California and the federal government say, we need to understand what you are modeling, and we look to the project list to understand that. And so, yes, we have some language. The projects, they're not enough to do the full analysis, but they do need to include the critical components. And the difference between a single lane and a dual lane is significant enough to have big impacts on both Clean Air Act and on greenhouse gas, which is why you want to show this is what we are actually assuming.
Fair enough, but the lane doesn't say not dual lane.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't say, but then it is not enough for, say, EPA, FHWA to know, well, what is a managed lane? Are you actually asserting that this is a single lane or a dual lane? Because the differences between those two things, sorry, does that mean? Will have significant impacts on performance. So we just need to understand which is it, right? And that's where they're going to the project
So
list.
question related to that. I know we've had some challenges, as you mentioned, with YOLO 80. I'm just curious, was the language for that managed lanes? Or, I mean, can we draw like, hey, we had this language in YOLO 80 and it's caused this specific problem. And so we're trying to avoid that now. And maybe it's a different project, but
It's the I-5 and the 80 listings that we had last time that said managed lanes. that received that
Okay,
specific.
so we're trying to avoid that very specific or that more general language. We had it in the previous plan. It's caused specific issues. We're trying to avoid that in the next plan.
Right. And then we have Amy here, if you want to hear just from the CEQA perspective, what does our plan actually mean on a project level?
Sure, I think that'd be
Before he
great.
gets there, he mentioned federal. How much of this is influenced by federal impact or oversight, whatever you want to call it?
So we have, just like we have a 2035 target for greenhouse gas, we have multiple target years that we have to show a
Are those statutory targets or those
statutory under
regulatory?
it's Federal Clean Air Act, under the Federal. Clean
But
Air
is it in the Clean Air Act or is it in the regulations?
The
There's going to be a change
There-
in
yeah,
management.
so I think I got
The
what you're
point
saying,
being,
yeah.
there's going to be a change in management in January.
I
And-
think
and
we
that
have to
could make
follow the
things-
regulations until such time as they change. So can
Well,
we
no,
hear
it's,
for
it's,
Amy?
it's different. It's different. The
No,
regulations can
It's
be
not
changed
different yet.
like that.
I think that's the key. Can we hear
And
from
there's been
Amy?
a change in management. That could
I
have.
just
an
want to say we've got Amy online from the attorney perspective. We've also have asked Kathleen Henley to come up just because she's been so involved.
Do you have a preference on who we hear from first?
Your call, but maybe we'll go to Amy.
Okay, let's go to Amy first then.
Sure. Good morning. As previously mentioned, I'm SACOG's outside CEQA counsel and have worked on the last several MTP SCS plans and the EIRs for those documents. And I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is, the EIR that you will ultimately prepare as part of CEQA, it's a public information disclosure document. That's what's required by CEQA. And so when you are developing your project description, that needs to be sort of sufficiently detailed so that everybody can understand what it is that you're analyzing. And so that it provides for a meaningful analysis and that what goes into your modeling is transparent to the public so that they can understand kind of what you're looking at when you say, the blueprint will achieve the greenhouse gas targets, and these are the other environmental impacts that we're anticipating. And so once you have that project list, that will get analyzed as part of the blueprint EIR, ultimately adopted as part of the blueprint. But as we know, the blueprint it's an aspirational planning document. It doesn't require then implementing agencies to adopt something that is exactly in line with what's in the plan. They will then have to go through their own project level CEQA analysis. The list of projects that are in the plan will influence what their project looks like. It would probably make sense for them to use it as one of their project alternatives or their planning alternatives. But it doesn't require them to ultimately just adopt what SACOG has adopted. And, to the extent what Caltrans ultimately adopts looks different from what is in the transportation project list, that might mean that it needs an amendment at some point. But there's nothing that prevents that from happening. I see a hand raised.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you very much. And thanks for that explanation, Amy. Oh.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Amy, for that explanation. I guess what I'm hearing though is some contradiction in the sense that there's a level of specificity required for the plan to be studied, but yet you don't have to build what you actually study. So we could just go ahead and say a dual use lane, a dual conversion is going to happen, but then not build a dual, which is very interesting because we could then argue that, well, we just said it just to game the study and then we just didn't build it, and that would be okay with with the regulations. So that's what I'm kind of curious is.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent you're seeking funding from SACOG, and this is maybe something James and Casey can address, you would have to be consistent with the plan. But if you're not consistent with the plan, then you have to update the plan. And SACOG would still be required to, when they look at this, make sure that you're going to meet your greenhouse gas targets.
Okay, and is there there's not a pre-decision component It's in other words, if you put forth exactly what you wanted, well, what you could want to do because you want to study it that way, is that under a CEQA or NEPA analysis, is that pre-decisional?
No, so under CEQA, you need to have a project description. And that's what you're analyzing. And then as part of the project description, you'll also have a set of objectives. And those are kind of the higher level, you know, we need a plan that's going to meet the greenhouse gas targets. We need a plan that's going to, you know, provide housing for everyone in the region. How you achieve that is what the specifics of the project are. But when the objectives are broad enough, then you can, once you understand what your project impacts are, then you can look at alternatives that will address those environmental impacts. And those alternatives still need to meet the broad objectives, but they don't have to meet the specifics in the project, you know, the very specific, it's going to be dual lane, managed lane, whatever. So to the extent there are, when we model this and we see that there are environmental impacts in various areas, there might be changes that we make to the project list as part of an alternative analysis. But we won't really know that until we know what our environmental impacts are related to the specific project that we're analyzing.
Okay. Thank you.
Ed.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments. I wanted to go back to something Director Sanders said about how Americans, I think I'm on. Can you hear me? How Americans can only have sometimes one idea at a time. And which I think was pretty profound in this discussion, because this is my understanding, the MTP has to meet the GHG target, period, hard stop. And the MTP doesn't tie Caltrans hands. Those are two truths, but our job focusing on this is to be consistent with that, to make sure that MTP is consistent with the GHG targets. That's hard stop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Chapman.
I think to follow up on that a little bit, I guess my question, two different pieces. One, do we have information on if that word dual is removed, what Caltrans is asking, what does that do to the 19.1% that's being modeled currently? And then in the letter, Caltrans talks about, you know, kind of a threat, if you will, of removing these projects from our plan. And then what is the impact if those projects are what Sergio was saying earlier? They say, we're going to throw our hands up and walk from this and not have those projects in. What does that do to our current modeling?
I'll start, and then if you want to close up. So first part of your question, remind me one more time, is on the
Sorry, the request to remove the word dual, right? Obviously,
Okay, yeah, and the
there's a
impact
lot
of
of
removing the
conflict around
dual
that.
or
What is-
removing completely.
Yeah, what are the impact of both of those?
On if we remove dual and we went single, we backslide and would miss the greenhouse gas target.
By, yeah, right. And
Oh,
it's
I-
a significant
Point-
amount of small.
I think we're talking. Yeah, and we're at 19.1. Right. I think we're down at like 18.8, 18.
Which is a lot. I mean, we're struggled to make
Yeah,
up small.
tenths of a percent
Got it. Yep.
here are big
Got it.
numbers for
Absolutely.
us.
Yep. Okay.
It's more complicated if you completely remove them. If you completely remove them, are we doing nothing? We're not adding capacity. So yes, the plan does have to achieve the greenhouse gas target. If you completely remove these, you see congestion go up. We may actually perform better on greenhouse gas because of congestion, right? Congestion is a disincentive to drive, right? So removal completely might help you, but you've also freed up capacity, right? You've freed up a financial capacity. And where is that financial capacity going? Is it going into something that helps us with greenhouse gas? Is it going into other congestion relief? So there's a feedback loop there that we don't fully understand.
Right. And then and maybe Sergio can answer this best. I think, what does that look like for Caltrans in terms of their quest for funding or relationship with SACOG around the projects that they pull them, right? Then what does that do in terms of?
If the projects aren't there, they would not be eligible to move forward, either with local funding. We would need to amend them back in, right? Because for the greenhouse gas, it's a different equation, that is an if implemented, do we achieve this? Under the Federal Clean Air Act, you would not be able to build any new capacity without fully analyzing and modeling it. So you wouldn't be able to move forward with the projects if they're removed.
Okay, at the,
So, Director
at the
Hamilton.
risk of triggering the fire alarm. So this is a programmatic EIR.
Correct.
We have a preferred project,
If this is approved, this project list, that would be
but
the
all
preferred.
alternatives are evaluated. So Caltrans managed lanes without the word dual is modeled, right?
Oh, for the alternatives for our programmatic EIR?
Yeah.
We could include a single lane managed lane network in one of our
They could,
alternatives.
as a comment
As they
as a
could as well.
comment to our EIR, make that comment, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
I don't know why we're here. Let's recommend to Lunar that we proceed with the list as it is.
Okay, just as a time check, we have about 7 minutes, so just as a reminder, so
Well, it's important.
I
Uh,
agree.
When
but-
you said that if this was not in MTP, then the score would go down from 19.1 to maybe 18.8. Just in the abstract, that strange credulity with me, because it's not that many lanes in the scope of SACOG. So it sounds to me like there might be a scoring problem, a scoring bias built in that encourages these things, whether or not they really make a difference. And so the scoring, I've got big questions marks about the scoring, and I hope to learn more about it. But from going to 19.1 to 18.8, just on these lanes, seems extreme.
Based on Director Branscombe, your requests, and I want to just extend the invitation to everybody. We have a luncheon in December between the committees, between Transportation and Lunar, where we're going to dig into the travel model and we're going to actually understand that. I will just tell you from all of the research that we have done and around the country, side by side, if you think about it, side by side dual lanes are actually a game changer, because instead of having a single lane, somebody breaks down, depending on it's a problem, you're actually creating sort of a road within a road, a freeway within a freeway. And it actually does, it makes a big difference to performance, anyway, we can share more of those with you. But it doesn't surprise me that we're getting that shift, because this is your main line freeway network. Okay.
So
go ahead.
Sergio, back to you.
To be clear, just a few thoughts. Back to what Amy was mentioning is, again, our projects have to be consistent with this plan, right? Everybody recognizes that. And that's where when you look at the specificity that's being mentioned, it has never happened to us before. This is the first time, first of all, I'll mention it. Second of all, maybe we can leave dual lanes in there, but then the statement we have here is without adding capacity. Then let's get rid of without adding capacity. And we'll have 2 dual toll lanes and we can look at the operation of that. But right now, this description is being very prescriptive, in the state highway system, to where it's basically choosing a preferred alternative. And I'll still go to that. Now, we can, if it's in the description that says this is for modeling purposes only, we can have that discussion. So we can, I've provided a lot of options. Mention it for modeling purposes. Get rid of not increasing capacity or get rid of dual lanes. But everything is in here where we have been boxed into a preferred alternative. That will be a problem for our NEPA and CEQA process for our projects.
And I think that is the question is, are you boxed in, right? And I think
Yes.
that's where we have a difference of an opinion. And what I would suggest, Chair Bradford, and as we know, Sergio, our teams and me and Sergio have been trying to come up with a resolution to this, unsuccessfully, obviously. But we get your team together, your environmental folks. I understand that's part of where this issue is coming from, is your environmental folks, and Amy on our end. And let's see if we can come up early next week and just talk this through. Because I think we have a sort of a bit of a misunderstanding of, does this create additional litigation risk for Caltrans to list projects this specifically? I will tell you, none of your other agencies have this has not been a problem. The role of the plan is to have specific projects in there so we can model them and show you what's happened. If you go through an EIR, you have the ability in the EIR to come up with a different
Well,
alternative.
okay, but I'm gonna add more to that. One is what you just mentioned, that's obviously a concern. The other concern is prioritizing one resource over everything else. We still have to have a safe highway system. If I'm gonna take 2 lanes without adding capacity and convert them, is that gonna make congestion better or worse? It's just a basic question. And is that gonna make that roadway safer or not?
What
Is that-
you're-
hold-
what
I'm
you
not
would
done.
need
Is
to
that- is
do
that gonna
study-
improve operations?
Study options in the EIR. That's what a specific project listing would require, is then that you have to go and study this, which as you and I have talked about.
I agree.
Sergio,
We can
you wanna
study
study
that,
them,
in
so-
which case we need to leave the description generic enough, and I think I've compromised ad nauseum and as much as I can to say again, get rid of the dual, leave everything else the same, or leave, let me finish, or leave
So
the dual.
I know that,
and-
yeah, it's not an
Yeah.
action item for us.
Sure.
And I know that you're not prepared to address this right at this moment,
Sure.
but I think, staff needs to, from both agencies, needs to get together, needs to explore what Director Habescheld suggested related to comments on the EIR that may provide you the flexibility that you think you need while still meeting the goals for SACOG to have it in here in a descriptive enough way that we can model it and meet our greenhouse gas targets. And so I would just suggest that discussion happen. And again, I know you're not prepared to discuss that now. You need to have other folks involved with that. And I also I don't know, Kathleen, if there's anything you want to add to any of this, but.
Nope, I'm just here to help explain if we went down a particular path, but y'all moved on, so great work.
Director Soon evidently has one more thing.
Yeah,
So
just a follow-up question to the hypothetical. If we remove these projects, I heard you say there would be a financial constraint, but I mean, is there a must-have that you actually have to fill that gap, or can you make a cheaper plan? And does that achieve both?
I think you'd have 29 or 28.
Well-
How many of us are there submitting projects to
No.
fill that gap? I don't
No,
know.
well, we shouldn't, because if we meet greenhouse gas reduction, the
Right,
19%, right? We should all just stand.
I mean, I have
pat.
to admit, I saw the 0.1 and I went, how can I
Well,
get in
it's-
there for 0.1?
So exactly, right? So is there a requirement to fill that gap? Because I see it, that's another path.
I can't think of a reason where you have to fill every last penny.
Yeah.
Right? A
so-
lot of our plan is dependent on discretionary grants as well, right? And so, no, you don't have to fill every last penny.
So the reason why, just real quick, because I'm hearing Caltrans is not ready to declare what they want to build because they need to do their analysis. And, we talked about that at the CARTA meeting, right? Doing maybe a programmatic EIR for them and that kind of thing. We also know that we need to, if they do put something in, it has to be specific so we can model it and as such. So, and we're not going to build this thing for a long time. It's got to be in the plan if you want to build it. But we're not going to build it because that's going to take a lot of time for it to model. So we're talking about something that is going to be way out in the future that they're not ready to put in the plan. So why do we need to have it in the plan?
It
That's-
doesn't help you achieve your greenhouse gas target. And I want to remind you, this is one of your primary responsibilities. If Caltrans wanted to remove themselves, as we've talked about, Sergio, as a project sponsor, and this has happened, right? We can remove Caltrans as a project sponsor. So it wouldn't say Caltrans, it could say TBD. We're not coming up with something we haven't all worked on. We have a managed lane system plan where this is one of the phases, that MLSP. So we could remove Caltrans as a project sponsor if it's giving them heartburn to be listed in there as their project. But it's
Still
your
meet the greenhouse
responsibility to
gas.
develop the plan with specificity that meets all of our state and federal.
Okay, that sounds like maybe if we can't get across the finish line on agreement, that
an
sounds like maybe a really good option.
Yep.
I know it allows us both to not have heartburn.
That's all.
So, okay, so
All right.
that part's true. So with that, it's, if there's,
Sorry.
oh, sorry.
Just one,
Go ahead.
not to belabor this point, but just a procedural question, maybe for SACOG staff, because I've got other, like we all do, probably commitments this afternoon. Is this item's gonna be, still be left for a vote for this afternoon's Lunar Committee meeting?
It's on for action at the Land Use Committee, and then it goes to the, if they recommend it, goes to the full board. My suggestion would be that we try to get together with your team and our team as soon as possible. That could be tomorrow, that could be Tuesday, given Monday's a holiday.
No, I understood, and that's my point is if we have to meet to discuss, and yeah, it's gonna go to a vote this afternoon, maybe I'm.
So the vote this afternoon would just be to recommend to the full board to
Okay.
approve. It wouldn't actually be approval.
Okay, that helps. Thank you, sir.
So, thank you. Yes. So, with that, we have one receive and file item. Any other matters? Well, actually, motion to recess, right, technically for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, and then we're gonna have a lunch and learn.
Got a
which
great
is-
lunch. You got Evan Schmidt from Valley Vision talking about economic prosperity plan and the California Jobs First grant. So do stick around if you can.
Okay, we'll see you in 5 minutes for that great presentation.
Yes.
Ready.
Kick you out. Come on. Yeah, it's exciting.
Very important to learn more about the sport.
Okay. All right, welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Wow, I'm sorry that we ran over. Apparently I lost track of time. So, we do these lunches from time to time, and we thought we hadn't actually touched back in on our economic prosperity strategy in a while. And we also really delighted to be joined by one of our key partners here, Evan Schmidt, who's the CEO of Valley Vision, who I know also is going to give you all a little bit of an update on this grant program. Fair to say a grant program? Yeah. California Jobs First. So, yeah, without further ado, and again, we told Evan this, they're informal, right? So she's got a presentation to run through. If you want to ask questions, you can. I'd just ask you to kind of give her a letter to get through a lot of the presentation. But if you've got questions as we go, fire away. All right. Evan.
All right. Well, thanks, James. Thanks for the invitation. And I'm really delighted to be here with you all. Like James said, I'm Evan Schmidt, the CEO of Valley Vision. And I hope you're familiar with Valley Vision, but we do regional work around quality of life. And one thing that we have strongly in common with SACOG is a commitment towards the triple bottom line. So all of our work really speaks to advancing social equity, environmental sustainability, and economic prosperity. And so the economic work that I'm going to talk about today really, speaks to a lot of broader values than that. It's really about how we become more climate resilient in our region, as well as how we create inclusive opportunities and become more equitable across our communities. And what I want to start is actually not there. I want to start here and talk a little bit about the prosperity strategy. And this is our region's current economic development strategy. It's designated as such by the federal government, and it's work that Valley Vision worked on with SACOG, with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, with the Sacramento Metro Chamber, and with the Sacramento Asian Chamber. So it's a partnership of regional civic leaders across the region to really look at what are our big picture goals around the economy. And we have a long history of collaborating on economic projects, but this was specifically started in 2017. And James actually was a real catalytic leader in this, in saying, hey, we want to make sure that we're aligning our infrastructure funds with our economic centers across the region. And how do we do that work in an aligned way and build around real data in our economy? And so at that time, we invited the Brookings Institution to come in and do an assessment for our region of our economic challenges, of our opportunities, and where we might be able to grow. And our metrics weren't great at that time. I'll say that we had some economic disparities around equity issues. So if we looked at our people of color, younger people, challenges in educational attainment, and a lot of inequities in our economy for folks who didn't have a college degree. And so that was one area where we had a lot of place for improvement. And I think another one was looking at the diversification of our economy. So, our Sacramento region has long been centered around our government sector, and that dependency on any one sector, it makes you vulnerable in a changing economy. And so part of the message from Brookings is you need to work on your sectors and you need to work on diversifying your economy. And so we created a set of 6 core goals to do just that. And so 3 of our goals were around key sectors that we wanted to grow and develop. And that included food and agriculture and health innovation. It included life sciences, which is kind of like biomed and biotech. And then it included future mobility. And that was how we're looking at clean transportation and all the innovation that goes into how we kind of center some production around our clean transportation economy. So those became our three key sectors that we were trying to grow. And then we also looked at enabling conditions. So what do we need to do in order to be successful in the growth of those sectors? One was target infrastructure investments to support economic clusters. And I know Green Means Go was a really important part of that strategy, or still is a really important part of that strategy of how we're looking at growing our population around economic centers in a way that's also sustainable. We wanted to be really identified as a business-friendly region. So that was a lot of work of the Metro Chamber to make sure that we're not only attracting businesses, but helping businesses grow here, including small minority business. And so there's been some concerted effort in that space. And then looking at workforce development and knowing that we really need to align our training opportunities and our growth opportunities to these key sectors and make those pathways really accessible. So that was the core strategies that we launched with that plan that really came into effect in 2020. It was actually like March 2020, which you'll also note is exactly when the pandemic started. And so, you know, we've done quite a lot of work on adoption, and we've also recognized there's been quite a lot of disruption in our economy since then. But some of our key achievements, you know, if you look at life sciences, the Aggie Square innovation, and food and ag tech, we've had a ton of growth in food entrepreneurship. Woodland's a great example of the new research park of Ag Start. I know you all toured that last year. So, and then future mobility with the California Mobility Center. We've also had some manufacturing firms come in around semiconductors that feed into that economy. So we've seen a lot of growth and a lot of progress. And this is really the foundation with which we're launching into this new program now that Valley Vision is managing and that I wanted to talk to you about today. And that is the California Jobs First program. This is a statewide program, and it's really the state of California's effort to, number one, build regional capacity across the state to drive our own economies. It's kind of California saying, hey, we're such a diverse state. All of our different regions have really unique assets and really unique challenges. And hey, regions, you're really the best people to build a vision. And we want to help you do that. But it's also about the state of California becoming more strategic and more diversified for our global stage, you know, really helping California be more successful in the global economy and build upon these regional strategies that we're building. And so that's what California Jobs First is. And it's also looking at a climate forward economy. So they're really focused on making sure that California is growing in our clean economy and building a climate resilient economy throughout the state. So the program has a few key features, and it's a little complex, so I'll try not to get into the complexities. But the first one is planning grants that they awarded across the state. So our region is an 8-county region, and I'll show you a map here in a minute. And we got a $5 million planning grant to do research, to do community engagement, to create some shared governance, and to create a vision for our region about how we want to grow. And that it has been underway, and I'm going to share the results with you. The next phase is called the Catalyst Fund. Our region has received $14 million to build our capacity towards developing projects and strategies to support what we came up with in the planning phase. And that's where we are right now. We just started that opportunity. And then the state is also supporting it on a statewide level with some implementation money. So they have $150 million statewide to support ready to go implementation projects. That's coming next year. And they're also putting money towards supporting tribal opportunities across the state. So that's a little bit about the statewide program. And then when we look at what our region is doing, the capital region, we've branded this as We Prosper Together. And we've been working on this now for 18 months. And the intention really is to build a regional vision based on our economic assets and opportunities to make sure that it is co-owned by institutions, business, community across the 8 counties, and to make sure that it's driven by data and needs in communities and anchored to both a climate resilient economy, but also the needs of our historically disinvested communities across those 8 counties. And so when you look at the goals that we're trying to create through the We Prosper Together initiative, we're trying to create more high quality jobs across 8 counties. We're trying to increase access to these high-quality jobs and reduce barriers for historically underinvested communities. And then we're trying to increase climate resilience in our economy. And I already told you a little bit about the programs and where we are. So you can see the planning phase in our region was from April 2023 until we just wrapped up in September. And I think I have a link in these slides for you to see the whole regional plan that we put together, but that's available on the website. And then included research. So we brought Brookings back to do a bunch of research for us, and I'm going to share some of that with you today. We had community partners across 8 counties doing community engagement, really hearing from the community about what they need to, where they see assets, where they see opportunities, and how they'd like to take advantage of those opportunities. And then we created a governance structure that's made up of folks from across 8 counties to really represent both those disinvested communities, but also our regional institutions. And then we're just launching into the Catalyst program. And I think the thing that's really important for you all to know is that we're right on the verge of releasing $9 million in grants to support projects that are pursuing the priorities that we identified in the planning phase. So that's coming later this month, and we're going to be inviting people to apply regionally to do these programs. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So I wanted to go into just a little bit of the Brookings data that they shared about the region. I thought this would be relevant for you, and you could also give you a sense of kind of where we're launching from as we think about the strategies that we're building. So I won't go, and I know there's a lot of detail here. I won't go into all the detail, but kind of give you just an overview. And then we have, again, on the website, we have this data and so much more going through kind of an interactive data book that shows you all kinds of different views of how we're performing in the economy. But what you can see in this slide, that as a whole, our region is actually performing pretty well this time period is 2012 to 2022. And these bars are, how do you think our region would perform within the parameters of the US economy? So just saying, kind of compared to performance of the economy, how would we expect to do? Compared to the performance of the California economy, how would our region expect to do? And then on the green is kind of how we actually are doing. So in many cases, we're overperforming certainly the US, and then we're on par or overperforming California in most instances. I think the exception is just we're really even on average earnings and productivity. But in terms of our regional economy in the state of California and in the US, we're actually performing pretty well.
Hey, Evan,
Yeah.
is that, can go back, is that the 6 counties? Is that the 8 counties? Like when you say we as a region?
That is a good question. And it's, in this case, it is the 8 counties. And I will say that the state of California handed us an 8-county region. So it is the SACOG 6-county region plus Nevada and Colusa. One thing I will note, both Nevada County and Colusa County are so small that I don't know that they're tipping the numbers too much compared to what we would see from a 6-county analysis, but they are included in all the analysis that we have.
And Evan, the Brookings data too delves into county-specific metrics, doesn't it?
It does, and you'll see a little bit of that here, but if you go to this interactive data book, you can see kind of all these different lenses, some of which are county specific. Yeah.
Does that mean that the state is counties as a region? What do you mean?
So the state, for the purpose of this program, the state broke up into 13 different regions. And for a variety of reasons, they put Colusa and Nevada in our region rather than someplace else. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's a categorical classification that they're putting out there. I think one of the issues was, as part of our planning threshold, like Tahoe is fully included in our region, and they're oftentimes with SACOG, they're kind of doing their own separate thing. In this case, they really are with us, and Nevada County has a lot of dependencies with Tahoe, so they wanted to be together. So that was, and then I think Colusa kind of in the raw, kind of in with Yuba Sutter County. So they had their reasons for doing it. It's a little bit of an anomaly for us. But it has also been actually a good opportunity to connect more with those parts of our Northern California region. And
Tribal within that 8-county?
Yes. Sovereign, yeah. It includes tribal, and we've had Right now, we have a tribal ambassador that we're working with to try to do more engagement with the tribes. They're represented on our leadership council, and they've been engaged so far. Yeah, thank you. Okay, one thing that I wanted to talk about here was our local serving industries versus our tradable industries. So if you look at this top really long bar, you'll see that reflects the share of our economy that is made up of local serving industries. And I'll explain this a little bit, and if you already know, forgive me, but what this really means is these are the industries that serve the needs of our local communities. They're not necessarily responsive to a global market. They're responsive to our regional population. So those are things like healthcare, construction, education, government. All of these have to do with the needs of our communities. And we don't necessarily have the power to grow jobs in these sectors because they're gonna get smaller or get bigger compared to what the needs of the community are. And then in the shorter bar underneath where you see tradable industries, and it's about 12.2%, those are our industries that are responsive to a global market. So that's where, like manufacturing, where you're producing something that that speaks to a much larger target audience than what's in our region. And that's where we have the opportunity to grow jobs because we're responding to a global market, and we can take up a larger share or a smaller share of that global market. Yeah, exactly. So that's a really, in the economic development space, that's a really important distinction when we're thinking about growth strategies. Because if we put a lot of attention into our local serving industries, it won't result in new jobs. It might result in better pathways for more people into the jobs. And that's a really important thing, but we're not going to be able to grow jobs with that focus. So you'll see coming up that we have a lot of, and you saw this in the prosperity strategy too, our strategies are really geared towards these tradable sectors, even though it's a relatively small part of our economy. It's important for our region that we grow that portion of our economy and have more sectors that are responsive to the global market. And then we looked at a share of struggling families in the region. So these are individuals who aren't making a sustainable wage or aren't meeting the sustainable wage threshold, which I'll share here in a minute. But we have a full, really 38% of our region, this is the 8-county region again, of families or individuals who are struggling and not making the wage they need to meet their basic needs. And if you look at that dark orange, the struggling working families, that means that, and that's 28%, that means that at least one person in that family is working. So their wage isn't enough to meet that threshold. And when you look at the struggling non-working, a lot of times that's retired folks. So that's folks who aren't looking for a job, don't have a job, but they're not making enough on an annual basis to kind of support their basic needs. So that continues to be a big struggle for us as a region when we really think about what are the economic needs that we need to meet in our communities to lift all boats and bring people up to a sustainable wage level. And just as Brookings told us in 2017, although I think our metrics have gotten a little bit better, disproportionately those people that are struggling are typically people of color. They're younger, which part of that can be a career trajectory factor, as younger people typically don't make as much money earlier in their career. And educational disparities. So as again, you would predict people with less education are apt to make less money, and in our case are vulnerable of not being able to make enough money or be able to make a sustainable wage. And then this is really small, and I apologize for that, but Brookings did do this analysis for us of what would it take, like what is a sustainable wage in our region? And they looked at all the different costs that go into people's budgets, including housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, emergency savings, retirement savings, taxes, and some other miscellaneous, and said county by county, what is that number? And if you're on our website, this is an interactive thing, so you can do a family size. So right now, this is looking at 2 adults and 2 kids, one's an infant and one's a school ager. And so for that family makeup, the adults in the family need to make, ranging from in the 60,000s, I think, to the 115,000, I think maybe is the highest. And when you have one full-time worker, the number's a little bit lower because childcare is not a part of that cost structure when you in a in a two-adult family. When you have two full-time workers, then that automatically bumps up your cost because of childcare with that family makeup. So it's significantly over the federal poverty line, which you can see in the bottom, and it's a substantial amount across our region, reflecting the cost of living conditions that we have here.
Where the graph do you find the electricity and natural gas expenses for the home?
It's a good question.
Those are that's a huge portion.
Yeah, I think those costs are under miscellaneous for utilities and other things. I'll check into that though, but I believe that's where they are.
Highest gasoline prices in the nation. We get the highest electricity prices in the nation. Those are real drivers.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So putting all that together, knowing that we have a high percentage of struggling families, we have a pretty high wage threshold. What Brookings did was, as part of their analysis, they looked at how many more jobs would we need in the region to meet the needs of our struggling families, and to bring at least half of our struggling families up to threshold incomes. And that number is 335,000 jobs. So basically saying we need to, in order to have better equity outcomes in our region, we have to grow jobs. We have to have more jobs to meet the needs of our communities and our population. So that's a significant number, and it really does point to this strategy around growing our sectors that can create jobs. And so I'm gonna, there's a lot more data that you can look at our website, but I'm gonna move on to talking about the strategies that we're building as part of this program, and where we're looking at targeting some action to address these goals. So our first goal is really just that, creating quality jobs to address that job gap, and really really focusing on that in our tradable sectors. And so with Brookings' help and building on the foundation of the prosperity strategy, we have 4 different tradable sectors that we're focusing on. So the first is advanced business services. So this is a sector that represents like headquartering, IT, technical services, business administration. This is really the strength for our region, and the competitive advantage is really around the skills that we have around government, right? Because that really translates to a lot of other professional skills and a need to build systems and have IT tech support and all of that. So it's a large portion of our tradable economy share of the market. And it's also really transportable to rural economies too, because of the way worker mobility has happened particularly since the pandemic. But you can live out in rural Nevada County and still own a business and grow a business that's providing these types of professional services. So that's one of our keys, that reflects one of our key strategies. The second is biotechnology. So this includes both food and agricultural technology, and then biopharma or biomed. So this is that same kind of that life and plant sciences thread, where we're looking at our food entrepreneurs who are developing alternative meat substitutions. And we have actually quite a lot of that type of work, or like entrepreneurship going on in the region. It's looking at ag tech efforts towards making more climate friendly technologies. A lot of those advancements that are happening right now that are coming out of research at UC Davis fall in this category. And then like the work of Aggie Square and some of that, all that biomed stuff is here too. So seeing that as a competitive advantage for our region. Third one is precision manufacturing. And this includes kind of a range of different types of manufacturing, instrumentation, microelectronics, machinery. One area of particular potential is semiconductor processing. We have Bosch that has just come into Placer County. That type of manufacturing in general is very niche, and it's also a driver of quality jobs. So manufacturing is one of those sectors that actually needs a lot of people and generates a lot of jobs compared to some of the others. So it's a really important strategy for our region. And then finally, the fourth one is working lands, and this includes food and agriculture supply chain and production, as well as our wood economy. So thinking about how we're like the potential in biomass here, and then also just how we're like the logistics around food and agriculture, as well as the production, food manufacturing, kind of all of those different pieces coming into working land. So we feel like with these 4 sectors, this really speaks to the economies of our 8 counties in different ways, and gives us a lot of potential for what we can build in the region. Yeah. like like pharmaceuticals. So it's like that, it's biomed, looking at how people, like how they're producing, like Bayer is here, like looking at how they're producing new technologies around health and medicine. Yeah. I don't know why we use biopharma and not biomed, but I think it's basically the same thing. Yeah. So that's our first strategy around tradable sectors. Our second strategy is around increasing access to high quality jobs for historically underinvested communities. And if you remember that bar of local serving sectors in our economy, that's about 82% of our economy. We're really aware that there's people who need jobs now and they need pathways into high quality jobs. And so we want to recognize that is an important part of an equity strategy in our region. It's helping connect historically underinvested communities to good jobs and in creating training programs that support that. And so the sectors that we're focused on there is healthcare, construction, and then art and tourism. And again, we feel like these three kind of speak to an 8-county region and create opportunities and pathways for people to get into new jobs. And then as part of the program, we're really looking at how are we supporting the workforce. And I mentioned the talent pipeline management here. It's a technique of workforce alignment, which I won't really go into, but just saying that, really working on how are we working with employers, training and education to point people to these high potential jobs and help our training institutions be really responsive to the jobs that exist and doing the right type of community outreach to help people land in those jobs. Then we're doing, as part of the grant, we're also just doing a lot of work around managing these sectors. So trying to think about the economic development side, the workforce development side, and point us in a direction that will be beneficial. And then my clicker's not working very well. Yeah.
In these in the tradable sector. There's real challenges in California tax structure, particularly regulatory structure. I took the company from some people, other people, and into a real manufacturing area. So I could power amplifiers for satellite uploads. And as we got larger, the regulators showed up in California, and we were jumping through all of those things. They made everything much more complicated, and they were problems that we would not have had if we were in Texas. So there's some real challenges doing business here. So your job, what you're trying to lead and focus on, we've got these big challenges. Regulatory is huge.
Yeah.
Particularly in California.
Yeah.
There's a reason people move into businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a challenge across California. And I have certainly heard that. I also think, there's a value proposition that I know we on this region are trying to make is like, hey, we're a good place to do business in California, and there's a lot of assets here. And that includes our research university. It actually includes our proximity to Silicon Valley. I think there is and any momentum that, I would say landing a company like Bosch here in the region doing semiconductor, are like they're doing kind of R&D. This. Yeah. 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 So they're focused, or they're just getting spun up, and they're focused on kind of the R&D side of that. And so those types of, like if you can create a niche like that within the region, then that helps drive more activity towards that. And so it's, I think it's just a matter of.
Why did they choose this region to do that? That's a good question. Because when you have a success model, you want to replicate.
Yeah.
Do you know why they chose this region?
I don't fully know the answer to that question.
Maybe a good question to ask, because you had success models we revered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I do think there's been a few new companies moving in. I think there are some definitely sales points for our regions when it comes to talent, innovation, proximity to advantageous places and things. So we do have a little momentum in that space. And I think that, people still find, a lot of people still do business in California, and there's just a landscape that we have to navigate.
But then people would still invest in companies that made things. Now you'll notice Silicon Valley, it's mostly software services, software as a service. And manufacturing and what have you has been offshore. But most of the thing manufacturers are occurring outside.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And when you look at traditional manufacturing, for example, we're not really making a play around traditional manufacturing because we don't really feel like we're going to excel in that. It takes a lot of land. I think in the current environment that we have, it's a less likely bet for us, but in that R&D space and that highly specialized like semiconductor type space, we feel like there is a competitive advantage there. So going to this is the last of the core strategies that I'm going to talk about, but this is about reducing barriers to economic mobility. And that's a really important part of this program. And so some of the key things that have been identified throughout the community engagement that we did was to address job training and workforce development challenges. So that's kind of that piece of really aligning our workforce and our education around our sector strategies and our and opportunities. Increasing access to childcare. This is a huge issue in our region. It's actually a huge issue across the country and the state, but being able to help alleviate that barrier is a really important part of an economic development strategy. Reducing infrastructure barriers, which I have another slide about, I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then increasing access to affordable housing and doing career outreach and awareness. So starting, in high schools, middle schools, helping kids understand what the career opportunities are and why they might want to go into them. So all of these are important ways to reduce barriers to economic mobility. They won't necessarily all be certainly solved within the confines of this program, but I think as we're thinking about regional strategies to align around economy, infrastructure, and other key quality of life goals, these are all important things for us to have our eyes on and to be working on solutions for. And I wanted to talk a little bit specifically about infrastructure needs because they differ so widely across our 8 counties, and they've certainly been highlighted particularly by our rural communities across the 8 counties. So to characterize a little bit about what we're hearing about this, and I think this is not going to be a surprise to most of you, but talking about transportation, especially around our rural communities, pavement improvements for safety, these farm to market routes where we have to make sure there's good connectivity between farms and where they're sending their food to. And I think, one thing to note here is the preservation of our rural economies and farmland is a really important part of our economic development strategies. Our food systems are some of our biggest assets in this region. So making sure that our transportation and the safety of our transportation is really tailored to the needs of our farms, and that we're preserving our farmland is an important part of how we're growing as a region and how we're preserving our assets. Next, broadband. This continues to be a huge issue across our region, and we've had businesses in rural communities, but even in some of our urban areas, pointing out that connectivity with broadband is one of their biggest barriers to growth. And they just don't have, it's vital for conducting business, and they don't always have the access that they need. So there's a lot of infrastructure focus on middle mile and last mile, and it's important that our region is able to bring those resources in and continue to advance those types of projects. On the water and energy side, we've certainly heard about our electric grid. So really ensuring that there is a responsive and high enough capacity system in place to help support business needs. And then I also think with electrification of transportation, that's a huge infrastructure need. And James was just saying before that he heard some of our new businesses who are moving in, Sparks. Was it Bosch too?
No, Solidyne and Rancho Cordova, semiconductors, partly based on SMUD and their ability to provide transformers and upgrades relatively quickly compared to other utilities.
Yeah. So super important issue across our region for economic growth, particularly in rural communities. Groundwater management, recharge, conveyance, sewage pipe expansion, all of these basics were highlighted as barriers to economic growth. And then finally, facilities, particularly in rural communities. So definitely heard about food processing centers and other hubs that help people centralize some of their functions around food logistics and food processing. And then workforce training centers, innovation centers, entrepreneurial centers, all these types of things to really help connect rural communities to job centers and to the regional economy, all really important parts of infrastructure needs. Yeah.
What are your thoughts regarding the preservation of rural farmland and the fact that now so many of the farmers who and hire and make it they want to sell their land and sell it or
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I think that, you know, as we're thinking of some of the things I talked about, like career awareness and the ways that we're doing technology in the ag space, like our ability to preserve our ag assets and also create pathways into careers for people around ag, which sometimes that looks like staying on the farm. Sometimes it looks like doing robotics to help support, you know, different farm mechanism. Like that land is such a critical part of the real assets that we have in our region around our economic growth, our quality of life, and the way we're able to support a new economy. And I think that there are evolving careers in agriculture, and continuing to kind of paint that picture and communicate to the people in this region what that could look like is an important part of how we think about the value of that land and our, you know, kind of collective desire to preserve that, as opposed to the development pressure that those farmers feel, and that I think, you know, pervades a lot in our region about the profitability of turning that over.
I walked the field today pretty hard. So because of the winds that we've had, there's some blocks that I didn't get to harvest on walnuts, and they're like on the ground, and so I don't see how the robot field will pick up everyone those and then put them back in a trailer.
They're usually robots.
I'm not. I have seen like the berry guys.
Yeah.
They're smart trailers.
Mhm.
Because before that you'd have one guy on a tractor and then people out picking berries and then putting them on the box, or the same person would park this tractor, go pick a few boxes, and also the tractor is too far from where you're at. So now they've got this little thing in their pocket, like and it follows them. So within 5-10 feet, you set it how far you want, so the trailer is actually following as you're picking up and loading the boxes on the berry cart. So I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
But like with the commodities that we grow, I mean, a robot would be able to take it off the tree and climbing up a little, get the ladder up and down with down stack. It's just not very good.
Yeah, I think like anything, it's like finding the right level of technology for what it's good for, and then knowing that that's not going to replace human capacity.
And some of the robotics, I'm sorry, I don't mean to take over. You're doing great, but like in Pacific Coast producers who we sell our pizza to with private label buildings all around, the world, but they brought on a robotic, like the actual sorting line has cameras that takes like 48 frames of each peach as it goes through this deal, and then it kicks them off into the boxes of like, okay, first it sorts them by size, then by defect, but then they still have people there verify.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's how we get paid for quality.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, everything before you used to be able to cut, and they would take like a ring, like a disc, to see the color. Was it too green? And they would know. Now it's actually all through cameras and infrared, and I mean, the actual.
Yeah.
The scans
And that's the perfect,
Pentameters for the softness, before you used to just cut it and see this bruised.
yeah,
It would have another card, it would be show the color, okay, if it's past this color, it's bruising over it. No, now they go put it in this machine, that sits there and pokes at it and tells you how much pressure it's got in it. So
yeah. And that's a perfect example of the evolving careers in the ag space that, you know, a lot of those, you know, field jobs are not, can be dangerous, they're seasonal, they're low pay, there's, you know, they're challenging jobs. As we think about, you know, all the different technologies and different things that are happening in the field, it also changes the perspective on what the jobs are. And there's different kind of ways that you weigh that, but.
So the one thing is that one of them stuck out when you said it, like seasonal being low pay, it's far from low pay. So the cheapest or the least amount that we paid to harvest was $30 a bin this year.
Mhm.
That's $30 an hour, right? And so I don't think that's cheap,
No.
right?
Yeah.
And then right now we're pruning, and that takes a special skill set. Like I was there negotiating today with these guys, and you're at their mercy. They're gonna tell you, you can say, oh, I want to pay you, you know, $4 a tree. And they're gonna do math backwards. No, they'd, you know, I could do this many trees an hour, therefore it's winter. I can
Yeah.
At least get $25, $30 an hour on this. I mean, so you're kind of there, and even in the springtime, when you're thinning these peaches, it takes a certain skill set. You can't go hire someone from a, you know, staffing firm or something to come out there. You can't, you can't do it mechanically. You know, someone off the street is not gonna know how to do it, and they know that they have that knack for it. So
Yeah.
they'll tell you, they'll base it on, hey, I'm worth $250 a day.
Yeah.
I'm worth $300 a day, right? I'm faster than that guy, right? And if he's in a UBX, I'm worth Y, whatever. You said.
Yeah.
No, it is. But it just, the point, the nerve thing I hate with nerves is I hate working with it. It's not low pay. I mean, it is, because we're competing with, you know, the whole construction, you know, like, because those are the folks that kind of, they'll leave the farm to go out to, you know, drive a backhoe with hammer nails and frame and, you know, put in foundation like that. So we're losing to that industry, and those guys, I mean, they could, it's different. They could pay the guys cash type of stuff. I mean, so you're kind of told, and we can't go say, hey, your minimum wage is $16.50 right now. It's gonna be whatever, no.
Yeah.
They tell you what they.
Yeah, no, understood. And that, you know, I think that preservation of farmland, that sector around the working landscapes is a super important part of the strategy, and really recognize the wide range of opportunities that are there.
You know, so Farm Bureau really pushes hard to try to preserve as much admin as we can, but then they understand it's just something in the spirit of influence, if you're in that development, then obviously you know, that generational, the ones we're worried about, that challenge, but they're able to sell, that's not.
Yeah.
As long as you get your, you know, your zoning and you annex into the city and that type of stuff, they never do push back with smart people. You know, I mean, nobody's gonna say, hey, go out in the middle, we're gonna convert this, you know, section of the rice land into, you know, a community. They're not gonna, you know, build something like that, even in Sutter County, they stopped building with checks because the Farm Bureau wasn't supported.
I've been reading a book by Peter Zion, The End of the World is Just Beginning. Brilliant book. And based on demographics and on trends. The forecast there is that the ag business, particularly in the United States, is going to be a booming business, even much more profitable as we move forward this century. The reason being that ever since the end of Bretton Woods Agreement at the end of World War II, every country used to produce all its own food, or most all its own food. The UK was an exception, but it's general. But Bretton Woods Agreement was the theory for international trade that the Navy was providing right for war. Everybody specialized. They either specialized in raw material they could export, whatever it was, they were best at, they specialized. And many of them gave up producing their own food. And now with the demographic patterns, you got this bulk here, but we're having fewer babies. Because when it was a farming centric country, people had as many children as they could for the free labor. And you kept having kids until you had one too many because you knew you didn't need them. And then you quit. But once you get urbanized, you said children become expensive ornaments. So it's obviously punishment. But in many of these countries, they will not have enough people to produce their own food, even if they want to. And so one of the trends longer term is U.S. agriculture is just going to be booming. And it's a great book in terms of.
It's interesting.
These highly regarded CIA and government agencies, big companies. For this stuff.
That
So
might-
there's reason to hold on to the ground if you're not half developed.
That reminds me too of the, the thinking about manufacturing that became so offshored that now it's become like a security threat to the US that we don't. Yeah, exactly. And so the CHIPS Act and other things that are really pushing us towards more domestic manufacturing because it's just seeing it in that lens of like, it's dangerous for our country.
That may be a target for local development of the economy. Which companies are going to be reshored? Is this an attractive spot? Do we have what they need?
Right. And that's why precision manufacturing is one of our key strategies of really looking at how do we be one of those magnets in the US that's pulling people back.
In the last decade, we ran problems with that. Trying to stop taking our garbage. Drive to recycle.
Yeah. So I know I'm just about out of time, or maybe already out of time, but maybe the last things that I would leave you with is that we are about to have this RFP go out for $9 million in our region, and I would love communication help with getting the word out about that, and I'll be sure to send that info back to you all. But that's going to happen in the next 3 weeks, I believe, that we'll be releasing that. Here's a little bit of information on the slide about the type of projects that we're going to be looking for, and they're going to be consistent with the priorities that I just went through. And then they're all about capacity building. And that's really what this state program is built around for our regional projects, is they want us to build capacity for both physical economic development projects. So that means things like feasibility studies, any planning activities, permitting, kind of everything it takes to get a physical site ready to go. Or if it's a program, really thinking about, the capacity in an organization to build partnerships, maybe doing community engagement, building some curriculum, doing program planning, like all of that kind of stuff is eligible as well. So just really want to spread the word about that and make sure that you've got that on your mind and can help share that with your communities. And, I think what I would just leave you with is this grant. First of all, it's more attention and resources in the state of California has ever given towards regional economic development, right? They really are kind of empowering us to build a vision, and then they really want to build on that for the state of California. So it's a great opportunity for us. It's a lot of capacity for us to build these strategies, to build some implementation, to build kind of an investment strategy is what we're aiming towards in 2025, so that we can really be clear. Here's our inclusive economic development goals. Here's the projects and priorities and strategies that we need to kind of reach our goals for our region. So that builds a lot of strategic clarity and coherence. I think there's also a lot of opportunity, and James and I have talked about this many times, but how are we really aligning our goals? And that was the same goal that was set out in 2017 around the prosperity strategy. But as we think about transportation and infrastructure, land use, all of these things, we should all be in the kind of in our different lanes, but working towards the same goals. And so this is kind of building our ability to do that. I also think that, we'll have, for the next 2 years, we'll have this $9 million to invest, but I really want this to be money that is leveraged through other sources too, right? So we're identifying a lot of needs, we're funding some of it, but then we're also, I want to find partners in government, in private entities to help us as a region kind of achieve some of these goals. And so one of our success metrics is how much more investment can we invite into our region to help us meet these goals. And then I just want to, it's an invitation for collaboration for everybody. really believe we have the opportunity to work together to advance kind of these really key economic strategies that we need for our region. So that's all I have for today. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and if you remember, I mean, Evan mentioned at the beginning, right, triple bottom line, equity, economy, environment. So we really want to make sure as much as we can, as we go into the next phase of the Blueprint 2025 plan, that we tie in some of these economic prosperity strategies and the economic clusters and tradable sectors. Anyway, just so stay tuned on that, that we don't want to have our economic prosperity strategy sit over here and our transportation strategy sit over here, and they should be woven together. So, well, more to come. All right, well, thank you. Like, big round of applause for Evan.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Sharing this.
Yes, we can
Yeah.
get the slides after.
Yeah, and I can follow up, Garrett, too, with some of the link
Yeah.
resources that I talked about to make
Yep.
sure that you have access to all
So
that
we'll
stuff.
put that out.
Yeah.